From Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunchers for this week's episode.
Hello, Gunchers. You were in the basement. You were literally in the basement all by yourself just for one brief second, but you're here with us tonight. We are breaking down chapters 24, 25, 26. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is Like Tears in Rain. So there's 3 chapters here, and this may be a longer episode, but there's a lot of great stuff here. I'm pretty excited to talk about nearly all of it. And joining me today is none other than my co-host, Mr. Dr. Will 8-Bit. Will, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hey, hello
how's Mexico?
you, sir.
How's
I
Mexico?
am back. I have cleared COVID pre-screening and am now socially distancing, not on purpose, at the house.
Good. Well, there's I like your background there, by the way. It's very delicious looking.
It is. Little known fact: the about 1/3 of the actual set was edible.
Really? In real life? Yeah.
In real life, yeah.
Okay. Well, don't spoil anything because we've got a lot here to talk about.
Oh.
All right. Well, let's get right into this. There's a lot to do, so we're gonna get into chapter 24. We'll get into 24, 25, 26 narratives, and then we'll get into all of the pop that goes with it. So. Chapter 24, this opens up with the Battle of Frobaz. So at this point, it's this battle has been going on for the better part of 12 hours. They're going back and forth. And the Sixers block all 512 instances of Frobaz. And the Gunters start to come up. They start coming to Frobaz. They eventually give up all of them. They don't try to block all 512. They kind of narrow it down just to 10. But they control those 10 instances, and that allows them to really start milling all of the Sixers through Frobaz in order to get the Jade Key. So there's at this point there's a lot of change that happens in terms of the scoreboard. You've got Artemis, Parzival, H, all kind of in first, second, third. You've got Sorrento and Shoto now tied for fourth, and then everybody else beyond that for like the next 5,000 names or something like that are all Sixers. So they're really kind of filling up the scoreboard at this point. He eventually, he gets off Frobaz. He wakes up, realizes that Sorrento's cleared the second gate. So that's a big shock and a surprise to him. He's completely devastated. Then Sorrento acquires the crystal key. So to make matters even worse, he ends up picking up the crystal key. So he's like on the cusp of getting this whole thing finalized, and he's at this point he's like even contemplating suicide. He's really kind of down in the dumps about everything. Feels like there's no end to this. It's a kind of a lost cause. When he finally gets a call from Shoto, who asks to come visit him, and he knows that something's going on because he wants to tell Shoto wants to tell him what happened to his brother, right? Because we know that Daito disappeared in one of the episodes just before, like last episode. So that's kind of what happens, a high-level narrative of everything that's happening in 24. And I don't know. I mean, as I'm reading this, I like the chapter, but I keep going back to this thing where it's like, okay, it feels like these guys were clearly cheating and doing things that were out of the spirit of the game. And why couldn't Ogden Morrow have stepped in and done something about this, given the amount of power he has? Or is that just complicating the story, bringing too much rationale to the story that gets in the way of the narrative itself? Yeah, no?
Agreed? Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Agreed.
That sentence was so long, I wasn't sure it was a question. I was like,
yes,
Your Honor, I'm going to need counsel to redirect. I think you were monologuing.
I was monologuing there.
And then just put like the last word in the question mark. So anyway, I was out today, and I don't know. What do you think? Okay.
If you say so, buddy. Yeah, there's so this chapter is pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not a whole lot in here outside of the cheating part of it all. So let's get into 25. So Shoto arrives on Falco, and they head to the family ties sitting room, which I thought was a really nice touch because It's just one of those rooms that's so iconic. And we've talked about Family Ties, so fortunately we won't be talking about it in this episode. We've done it in a previous one. Shoto confirms that they've killed Daito, and he tells him his real name, which is Toshiro Yoshiaki, and they blame it on suicide. So they killed him in his apartment while he was jacked in. They both exchange real names. So Akihide is Shoto, and obviously Parzival tells him that his real name is Wade. They and then Shoto goes on to explain that they actually weren't brothers, that they were two people that had been recovering from too much Oasis. They were kind of in a support group, and that's where they met. And they decided to pair up together and, try to tackle the Oasis together when the contest came out. So as a side note, at this point, there's estimated about 2 million, or I think he says in the book that there's like 1 million people or 1 million kids, the missing millions, which are the hikikomori kids that kind of lose themselves and don't really want to go out and be a part of society, and they wall up in their parents' house or in a bedroom in the parents' house. And I was looking at this. I just wanted to dig into this, and because it's really not pop, but I just was curious. Like, so how's that number look now as of 2020? And as of 2020, at least, the worst estimate is that it's up to 2 million now, and most of these are between the ages of 15 and 64, which I thought was very surprising that they're classifying today's hikikomori as being that. That's a really broad range. I mean, you might as well just throw in anybody that's still alive, breathing, hanging up in the room. But it has gotten worse, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to say. It's gotten worse. It seems to have not gone away, even though the novel was written, 11 years ago or however long it's been now. And so they're they were kind of a dynamic duo. Toshiro was really into video games, and Akihide was really into pop culture. And together they were kind of a clan of two, if you want to call it that. But that's why they were able to kind of do so well in the Oasis and with a lot of the riddles. So on Frobos, the Sixers try to take out Kurosawa, but Daito uses the beta capsule. So, and that's when he turns into Ultraman, Ultraman. He goes around smashing ships like toys, I think is how it reads. And just as they were fending off the Sixers, Daito yells to Shoto, I think someone is here, someone is inside, and then his feed cuts off completely. Daito was logged out, his character defeated, and Shoto went to recover his items. Shoto then, at the very end of it, hands Parzival the beta capsule, which we talked about a couple episodes as well. And Parzival hands Shoto a Masamune blade as a way of saying thank you. So they're exchanging gifts, which is very customary in Japan, of trading gifts with one another whenever you meet and greet and all that. So that brings us to the end of chapter 5. So quite a bit that happens in there. We get we get a real good, deep inside look into what exactly did happen. And you're kind of left at this point. It's been at least a chapter or two since we were really able to find out the fate of Daito. So that was a pretty good one. But any thoughts on this one before we get into 26?
Yeah, I think this was the chapter that I think when I read, you knew this was probably the chapter where Spielberg was like, this is a movie. Because this is really where it starts, in my opinion, looking like a movie that is going to be marketable. Before that, there's a lot of similarities with existing science fiction, but I think here is where it really starts gelling as an action adventure film.
Yeah.
At least in my mind.
No, I get that. All right, chapter 26. Let's see. Wade is going over the continue your quest by taking the test part of the riddle. He's examining the foil on the jade key that it comes wrapped in, which reminds him of Blade Runner, then he says unicorn. And when he says that word unicorn, we'll talk about that here later, the paper then turns into a paper unicorn from Blade Runner. So he realizes, okay, I'm onto something here. This has got to be related to the test. So at that point, he figures out almost immediately that the test is the Voight-Kampff testing mechanism or whatever it is, testing device from Blade Runner. He ends up taking off to look for a Tyrell building. They're basically everywhere, he says, in all of the punk rock, cyberpunk, whatever worlds that are out there. Everyone just has one of these buildings because it's kind of a staple. He goes into the building. A huge gunfight breaks out. And between him and replicants, as he tries to makes his way over towards one of the Voight-Kampff machines, he pulls out the jade key, inserts it, and then he jumps through a portal into the second gate, much like we've seen in the first gate. He's then teleported to Middletown Lanes, a bowling alley from Halliday's past, and begins to get sucked in towards the game room And then eventually you get sucked right into the arcade classic Black Tiger. And this begins our second gate challenge. And it's just him trying to play Black Tiger. He's trying to do a 2D sprite game. Everything is now 3D. There's been a lot of games that have been like that too, and I don't think we have it as part of our discussion tonight. But as I was reading that, I thought, there were quite a few games that came out, especially in the late '90s, much throughout the 2000s, where they took the 2D concept and said, okay, let's try to make this into 3D. They were met with varying degrees of success. The one that comes to mind that I thought was absolutely phenomenal and perfect in almost every way was Metroid Prime for the GameCube. That was a game that was originally going to be on the N64. And they couldn't get it right, didn't like what they were doing, what they were seeing. Eventually, the GameCube came out, and that is a prime example of how to do a 2D game in a 3D world. So, but anyways, nonetheless, so 3 hours later, he finally completes the game, and he gets teleported back to the game room. And during the game's credits, he is awarded a robot, which we'll break down here a little bit, as well as just kind of an additional prize, and that will play off hugely for him later in the novel. And of course, he naturally chooses Leopardon from Supaida Man, because that's cool.
That's his fault.
The end credits of the game finish with an image of a red 5-pointed star and a crystal key in the middle. Wade knows exactly what his next clue is, and that's Rush at that point. So, and that's where it ends. He's on to find his next clue with that. So, thoughts on chapter 26 before we pop into the pop?
Yeah, I thought the guessing for the foil was a little fortuitous. I'm not sure. That's a big jump to go tinfoil. Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Get out of here, bro.
Tinfoil, unicorn. I mean, he did have the word unicorn. He had to say that in order to do that. But then
well, that's even more impressive.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's more impressive.
Like,
right.
It's not like you just said Blade Runner. That wouldn't be good enough. Like, I know this is from Blade Runner. Like, I know this whole thing, and he starts narrating the whole story, but never actually says unicorn. Come on, bro. There's no way.
Yeah. Fair enough. I get it.
Classic.
But he does get it. So, yeah. And this is at this point, this is where I'm like in full geek mode reading the book every time, just because of what's coming next and all of the Rush stuff.
Keep it all in your pants. It's coming. It's coming. In fact, I think when we get to the Rush section, whatever episode that is, I probably won't talk at all.
Well, it's funny you say that, because we've got, when we get there, not to spoil anything, well, I'll save it. We've got a special guest coming on to the show with us when we get to the next chapter next week. So,
awesome.
I don't know if you knew that, but yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Is it my brother-in-law? He's a huge Rush fan.
No, it's somebody who's been on the show before, but let's get into the pop.
Okay.
Let's get into the pop. Let's play the feud.
Let's do it.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, first thing is this guy, Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Here is the quote. I knew the secret to deciphering the riddle must involve the wrapper in some way, but I still couldn't sort out how. I wondered if it might be a reference to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but then decided against it. So Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was released in 1971. It was directed by Mel Stewart. It's based on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Ronald Dahl.
Why does everybody put the in there?
I didn't mean to. Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl. I do it. I know. It's terrible. I shouldn't have done that. But we talked about him before. What was the other one he did that we talked about? Was it?
Yeah, he's done a few different books.
I know.
In fact, I think I've listed them all there for you.
Oh, did you really?
I think it's on. Yeah, I think it's right there.
You can
so
read
the Witches,
that.
Matilda, Charlie and Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach. I think that's where we talked about him.
I think you're right.
Yep.
So this is
and BFG. We may have talked about him then too.
Very true. Very true. So based on that book, it stars Gene Wilder as Willie, Julia Dawn Cole as Veruca Salt, Michael Bollner as Augustus Goop, Paris Themin as Mike TV. I don't know if I'm getting these names right or not.
No, you're all right. I'll let you know when it's.
Yeah. Peter Ostrom as Charlie Bucket, Denise Nickerson as Violet. Beauregard? Did they ever say her name? Did they say her name?
Yeah, Beauregard. Yeah.
Beauregard. Okay. And a bunch of little people. All right, take it away. Tell us about. Tell us about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Well, if you don't know, the synopsis of this movie goes something like: a crazed chocolate maker decides to give his entire factory to an untrained child, which is much like the English monarchy worked for centuries. All they have to do is find a golden ticket that's hidden in a candy bar, which is the best marketing ploy since New Coke. So on a trip to get his grandfather some tobacco with the limited money that the family has, Charlie Bucket finds a golden ticket in a bar. His disabled, air quotes, grandpa, who hasn't risen from bed in years, immediately jumps up and begins dancing about how he won. Absolutely ridiculous. Terror ensues as these kids are killed off one at a time in what is probably the first iteration of the Saw film.
Yeah, right. This is the prequel.
It is. So Roald Dahl, interesting character, served in World War II, served with Ian Fleming, actually. He wrote James Bond's You Only Live Twice and co-wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He didn't actually write any children's books until around the 1960s. Before that, he wrote much more adult fare. And this story of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was actually inspired by his childhood. He lived near the Cadbury factory, and they would actually recruit kids from his class to go in and sample some of the chocolates that they were thinking about releasing. And all of that led to him coming up with this story. Interesting. Yeah. So I know we're probably going to get into it because no discussion of this movie is complete without us having a debate as to which of these films is the better film, whether it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Just so you know, yes, the title is correct in the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, as Albert pointed out, but that's only because of complaints by the NAACP regarding Roald Dahl's work. So, some issues.
Right,
so they didn't want to associate the book with the movie at the time that it was released. I will tell you, I've gone through and I've seen both of these movies. I prefer the original for a ton of reasons, primarily Gene Wilder, the music, and really just the color palette. But interestingly, if you were like a purist, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we'll just refer to that as the new one. The new one, Burton's, is probably closer to the feel that the book is trying to create. Because if you didn't know, it has a sequel, and that sequel is called Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. That's the name of it. Mm-hmm. And so that one, it starts exactly where the first movie ends, right? Where they're going up and they're in the Wonkavator, and they go to space, and then it just gets out of control. They meet the president. There's all kinds of craziness. The vicious Canids are seen, who are referenced in the original version, but they make an appearance. Charlie eventually goes to the White House after the ship crash lands back into the chocolate factory, and they have to chase his aunts and uncles through a space-time continuum because they start shrinking and become it's indescribable. It's unfilmable.
Did he do the novel? Did he do a novel for that too?
He did. So Roald Dahl did the novel for it, but he hated Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory so much that he refused to give them the rights. In fact, Roald claims that he never saw it. He never saw the movie, and he was disgusted by it. But there is photographic evidence of him watching this film, and he went to the premiere by all accounts. So sorry, you're such a drama queen.
It sounds like this seems like not to get off on a tangent. It seems like we run into more and more of these authors, like in the late 60s, 70s, that had these books that were getting churned into movies left and right, and they seem to be opposed to the movies, and probably rightfully so. Maybe it's because it wasn't true to their source content, or they felt like it was being changed beyond, and they've already signed contracts. But it does seem like that's kind of been a reoccurring thing. I don't know that you hear that, so maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm blind to it, but I don't know that I hear that as much as what it seems like we go through, at least on this show anyways.
Well, I think a lot. So I think it was different back then, that there was an understanding that a book got turned over to a screenwriter, and the screenwriter did his own adaptation, or the director did. Where today, I think it's far more common, much like Ernest Cline, who published Ready Player One. And then as a condition, he wanted to be the first bite at screenwriter for the adaptation, which is, I think, more common to see in Hollywood today than it was back then. It was considered a different medium and required a different type of author, but that's not the case. So there, on the little GIF at the bottom of the screen, you see the entrance of the great Gene Wilder. Tell me, Albert, I got a question for you, a little trivia. How far into the movie are we when he makes his first appearance? How many
far?
minutes?
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna say 53.
Oh, pretty good. 45. That's
I
pretty
knew it was
late.
I knew it was late, but I didn't know it was 45. That's still a long time to see the main character of the
It is.
movie.
So this wasn't the. What's interesting is the kids weren't really told what was going on for the majority of the making of the film. So when they went into the chocolate room for the first time, it was the first time that they had ever seen that set.
Yeah.
Much like in this scene, they didn't know that Gene Wilder was faking his limp or was going to do that role. All of it was pretty shocking to him. But I love this one, and I do not like the Tim Burton one.
Did
Right,
you run
it's-
across? Yeah, go ahead. So.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, did you run across the background on the role and why he does that?
Why he does it?
Why he does the role?
I don't know why he does it, but
Here,
I know
I got
that.
it. I got it.
Shoot.
So here's what happened. So when they were pitching the movie to a number of people, and I forget all the actors, of course, it's one of those things where you're like, oh wow, he's cool, and we got some of that a little bit later. But when they were pitching this movie, he said that he would do this movie on only one condition: that when he's introduced as Willy Wonka, that he's allowed to come in with a cane and then go into a role and then pop back up. And the reason why he said that he insisted that that was put in the movie was because he wanted to establish that at that point, you could not trust him about anything he was going to say from that point on. And so they wrote it in. It wasn't originally in the screenplay. It was Wilder's decision for that.
Very interesting. So I think the contrast between this film and the remake is that the first film is largely about Charlie, where the Tim Burton is largely about Willy Wonka, right?
Yeah.
Like it opens with him.
Right.
And so I put on here some of my favorite scenes from the movie, most of my memorable scenes that I liked. The Chocolate River is probably the scariest part of this entire film. It is almost sadistic the way Gene Wilder plays it. And the kids, once again, didn't know what he was doing, right? More importantly, like even the Oompa Loompa that's steering this thing, they didn't tell him it was on rails. So he thought he was actually steering it, right? He didn't know what was going on.
I'm pretty good at this.
The Oompa Loompas in the dark once again. So Oompa Loompas lead us to why the movie title was changed. So if you read the actual book, I've left an image up there for you. That is how the Oompa Loompas are drawn in the original book. And there is reference specifically to him. And I think the quote from the book is, Wonka explained that the workers were not made of chocolate, but they are, quote, real people. These are some of my workers. He had imported the tiny black people, quote, direct from Africa.
Oh.
They belong to a tribe of tiny miniature pygmies known as Oompa Loompas that came from the very deepest and darkest part of the African jungle where no white man had ever been.
That's
what
crazy.
In the actual,
I didn't know. I had no idea.
Yeah. And
all right. So yeah, that would explain why they were a little PO'd
the
about.
NAACP said, look, you can make your movie, but we don't want it promoting the sale of this racist book.
That's crazy.
And that's what happened. So we were talking earlier about, how the set was 1/3 edible, but what wasn't was this little tulip teacup looking thing that was not edible. So I know you've talked about the hero's journey before. And so a lot of what happens in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, it mirrors both the 7 deadly sins and the hero story of redemption. So Augustus is glutton. Then you have pride, greed, Mike TV's sloth. And then because of the sadistic nature of what he's doing to these kids, Willy Wonka is seen as anger, and then Charlie Bucket being seen as envy. In all of the kids representing lust because of their want for the chocolate factory. So you can break this movie up into 3 acts to follow the biblical redemption story, where you start with the temptation of them looking for the magic ticket, them leaving paradise at the point that each one of them is drawn from the story. And then finally, Charlie Bucket's redemption story at the end of the film. All right. I've always found that pretty interesting.
That is pretty cool. Wait, so is that like
that's
hey,
not
the
canon.
author said, okay.
No.
All right. No, that's
canon.
fine.
Roald Dahl he's a crazy man. Did I mention the aliens in the sequel? No. He was actually going to write a 3rd novel right before his death called Charlie Goes to the White House. I'm just glad it wasn't made. The guy
What?
had he had some old school feelings about things. I'm afraid you got a little racism in my chocolate factory. Can't do it.
I can't.
So my favorite thing about this film, the most memorable thing, is the Oompa Loompas and all of the music throughout. So the Oompa Loompas, interestingly enough, this was filmed in Germany, and most of them were German, and one of them was a woman, and none of them spoke English. So if you watch this on replay, most of them don't look like they're mouthing the words properly because they don't know what they're saying. All of that was dubbed later.
We'll fill it in post. Just fill it in post.
Yep.
Interesting.
Oh, JR points out that, Wilder was to play Halliday in the movie, which,
Oh, right. That would have been
Ernie has said the same thing. I agree. That would have been brilliant.
Yep. Circles. So I guess my quick take on this is I don't know which one I like more. There's something very nostalgic for me.
That's not even a question. Like, stop watching if you like the Tim Burton version better.
Well, there's something nostalgic about it, but this movie scared the crap out of me as a kid. Like, it came out before, 71, right? So 2 years before I was even born, this thing came out. And I remember seeing this because I had older cousins that watched it. But it scared me, and I did not want to watch it. And so I don't really have it. It's not a fond memory for me because I was too scared to watch it. Although as an adult, I appreciate it and I like it. But I've seen the Tim Burton one a lot more times than this one. So I don't know. I'm not going to say one's better than the other. To your point, they both have like their strengths. If I had to pick one to watch, it's probably going to be the Tim Burton because otherwise I'm in a fetal position under the bed somewhere.
Dead to me.
Yep.
Dead to me with that, Albert. That's nonsense. You take that back, Ricky Bobby.
Let's get on to the next one. Let's get into Pat Benatar. Oh, wait.
Oh, Superman.
That's not Pat Benatar. No, I'm just kidding. That's not Pat Benatar. That's Pat Benatar right there. Oh, wait. No, that's not Pat Benatar.
That's Liza Minnelli.
That's Liza Minnelli. I'm sorry. I have the wrong slides up. I do apologize.
What in the
Here we go. There's Pat Benatar.
What in the world?
All right. Here's a
She
reference.
looks the least like Pat Benatar. Are you sure that's Pat Benatar?
As a kid, and I've said this joke. I've done. It's not a joke. It's true. As a kid, I thought that she was Pat Benatar in Superman 2 because I knew she was. But yeah, that's not Pat Benatar.
I like the Liza Minnelli. Why do you sit alone in your room?
There's a story behind her. Hold on, let's get to it.
Sure, I have no doubt.
There's a tie to that. All right, so this is Pat Benatar. Here's a reference. I tried everything I could to reach her. I sent her Avatar flowers. I made multiple trips to her Avatar stronghold.
Oh, shoot. I didn't know you were reading the quote. I thought you were talking about Pat Benatar. I'm like, really? You'd have had better luck from the chick from Superman 2.
Show is off the rails.
Strong drinks.
I'm reading the quote at this point from chapter 2. Let's see. I tried everything I could to reach her. I sent her Avatar flowers. I made multiple trips to her Avatar stronghold, an armored palace on Benatar, the small moon she owned. Now, that's the quote from chapter 20. I use it because it's actually technically the first reference of it, but we deferred it to this chapter. So, in full disclosure, that's where it's from. The quote from this chapter, or at least from chapter 24, says, I considered flying to Benatar to try to get Artemis to talk to me, but then I came to my senses. So this is Pat Benatar. She was born Patricia May Adraszewski. I hope I said that one right.
I'm sure you didn't, but let's press on.
She was actually inspired to get into music by Liza Minnelli. I kid you not. True story.
Huh.
So she was inspired to get into music by Liza Minnelli. She eventually released her first album, In the Heat of the Night, in 1979, which had Heartbreaker on it. And that was a huge hit, right? I mean, everybody knows that song. You can probably sing it and play it. A lot of people know how to play it. It's one of the first things. She went on to do a number of albums and had a lot of success. Let's see. She had Hit Me With Your Best Shot in Crimes of Passion in 1980. That reached Crimes of Passion itself reached number 2 for albums. And then Precious Time album, which is the one on the far left-hand side there, that actually reached it reached number 1 in 1981. Promises in My Dark, and there's a ton of great songs here. I didn't even know where to go. Love is a Battlefield, We Belong Together, Heartbreaker, Invincible, Shadows of the Night. I mean, there's quite a few hits in here. I think one of the things that was very interesting, though, about her was that she actually never had like a number 1 hit in the U.S. The closest she ever got was number 5, and that was with Love is a Battlefield in the U.S.
Yeah.
Which is a great song, don't get me wrong, but if you think about some of those other ones, I mean, they're pretty big hits, and they're very synonymous with the 80s and kind of staples when you hear about like 80s music playlists and all that. But yeah, surprisingly, she never actually got to number 1 with any of those.
Love is a Battlefield is, in my opinion anyway, the best song. Like if I hear that song, I immediately start doing the dance from the club where they're just like rocking back and forth, doing their thing.
Yep. No,
I have to stand up to give you the whole show.
No, let's not do that. That was in 1983. I have a hard time picking my favorite song from her. She's got so many. Now, I know she's a personal. I don't remember where this came up. It's in one of Ernie's interviews. I don't remember. I think he's obviously a huge fan, but I want to say it's his wife's like favorite performer or one of her favorite performers as well. So had a lot of significance to him as he was writing the novel because of personal reasons with Pat Benatar. Here's just quickly a little bit of trivia. So Benatar is actually the name of her ex-husband who she divorced in 1979. She ended up marrying this gentleman here, Neil Spider. Spider is what I think everybody knows him as.
Hey, Spider.
Spider.
Was he one of the Jets from West Side Story?
No, he was close. But no, he was 1982 is when they got married. And they've been married since. I mean, they've been going. I mean, they figured it out, right? I mean, they've been married this entire time. He's actually the lead guitarist, and that's how they met. He was the lead guitarist for her back then. Quick trivia on that: his name Spider. He was. They were walking somewhere, and I forget where they were. They were out strolling around, and they came across a sign that had. And this is right after he had just joined, and they were doing their first tour together. So they weren't really. I don't know. I don't think they were together in any way. But they were walking together somewhere. There was a sign that said Spider's Diner Club, and it was a black and yellow sign. And she turned to him and said, "Isn't black and yellow your favorite color?" He said, "Well, yeah, it is." And she said, "Well, fine. That's what we're going to call you. We're going to call you Spider." He's had that name ever since, and it was given to him by Pat Benatar. But he is such a cool guy, man. I was watching interviews with him and just hear him talk. He's so humble, just down to earth. I mean, just got a really good head on his shoulders. So I really enjoyed. I was getting caught just watching interviews of him and losing myself to Pat Benatar. So Pat Benatar's last album was Go in 2003. And I don't know, it was kind of a rough album, to be honest. It wasn't my favorite. She definitely hit her prime in the late 80s or late 70s, most of all the way through the 80s, through 84, 85 up there. And then she had one in 2003. That Go album has never been released. It's not even digital. You can't find it. I mean, it's been released, but you can't find it digitally. So I wasn't able to listen to it. I heard a couple of YouTube videos and stuff, and it was kind of, I don't know, more singer-songwriter, I guess, as she was getting older. But I don't know. You a big Pat Benatar fan?
Yeah, I mean, she's a consummate 80s playlist kind of artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly don't know the level of trivia that you just provided me, but now I do. You know, once he named himself Spider, several LA gang members adopted the name because that guy looks tough.
I'm sure that was the inspiration. I don't know. Take your pick. Either one of those. But they're a cute couple, man. Good on them. Good on them. All right. This is where it's going to get weird.
It's going to get weird.
Let's talk about Play-Doh. The reference is, my brain felt like hammered Play-Doh. I couldn't make any sense of the clue printed on the jade key. So Play-Doh was invented by Noah McViver, originally as wallpaper putty. And this is...
wallpaper cleaner putter.
Yeah.
It's a cleaner putty.
It's cleaner putty. Yeah, what did I say?
Yeah.
I said wallpaper putty, but it's wallpaper putty. Cleaner putty is what I meant to say, yeah.
There you go.
You would use this stuff, put on your wallpaper, and it's funny because this was huge because if you think about it, back then they were using coal to heat homes, and so coal left the dark stuff all over the walls, and so they would buy this putty and go through and take it off. Well, he ends up meeting, I guess his nephew came in to help kind of bail him out because after World War II, there was a big change in how we heated homes. We moved from coal over to natural gas. So he, numbers are starting to decline, sales are starting to decline. He brings in his nephew to kind of help out, and his nephew joins along with a nursery school teacher, and she had read that kids were using this putty, this cleaning putty, to make things with, like as an art project or whatever else. And so he decides to go ahead and retool the formula and tries to go about making this putty into some kind of a kids thing. So the goal was to move it and use it for school projects. He rebranded and resold in 1956, and that's when it was changed. They changed the name from Rainbow Crafts Company to Play-Doh. And then by 1958, just 2 years later, after he came out with Play-Doh as we know it today, sales were already at $3 million. So, I mean, it was just kind of rocketed off it within 2 years. after he kind of made that transition. There's a lot here to talk about. Just quickly though, this has been owned by several companies: General Mills, Kenner, Tonka. They've all had ownership for it at some point. It's now today owned by Hasbro since 1991. They've had a number of mascots. So you've got this, what's his name? Pixie?
Yeah, that's the first one. Technically the second one, because the first can, while we know Play-Doh for having millions of colors today, when it was first sold in 1956, it only came in 1.5 pound cans and only in off-white.
We've got to clear that. We've got to clear the storage. There's too much of it.
So it's interesting. You know how this business took off like it did? Because who wants a 1.5 pound can of off-white putty that could also be used to clean your walls?
I know.
Like, do you know the background of how it took off so fast?
Was it just schools that needed it?
No. So like you said, they're about to go bankrupt. No one's buying a lot of their putty because, again, you can only make so many clouds, and eventually you want to do something else. Right. And so they actually reached out to Captain Kangaroo, whose show was huge at the time. Yeah. And they said, hey, man, we've got this deal. We can't pay you, but we'll give you 2% of total sales, not profit, sales.
Wow.
In perpetuity if you do this. But they didn't have any money. What do they have to lose? Well, as of today, they've sold over 3 billion units. At $1 of units, that deal would have been worth $60 million and over $240 million adjusted for Captain Kangaroo, doing nothing but pimping off-white Play-Doh once a week.
Once a week. That's crazy. There's I've got the 3 mascots. So there's whoa, what the heck? Sorry. I don't know what happened there. The mouse is super sensitive. So there's the Pixie one. There's the Play-Doh Pete, I think is his name, Play-Doh Pete. And then the bottom here in the middle, this is the Dodos. So this has been since 2012, I think. This has been their mascot, which I didn't realize they had changed mascot. I always thought it was just the Play-Doh Pete guy.
Play-Doh Pete actually changed. So by the time we were in the 80s, he didn't look like that anymore. Oh, yeah. That's like 70s him. In the 80s, he got a baseball cap, and then he was in the upper right-hand corner. Remember that? And they just had a picture of his head.
Yep. Yeah. And I had actually originally had that down for this, but then I thought, well, this seems more neutral. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's what I remember. The amount of people that eat Play-Doh is just ridiculous. Like, I don't get it. And I was, let me tell you this too. So when I was doing this, I was like, okay, so I wonder how many people are recording themselves eating Play-Doh. I went out and found a YouTube channel where this girl eats Play-Doh like by the canister, like she's going to eat the blue one. And it's one of those ASR videos or whatever. I don't get this, by the way. And I don't mean to throw shade on any, but you're weird if you like listening to people eat food all day long on a super hypersensitive microphone.
Oh, it's a thing.
It is a thing. It's crazy. Yeah. Like, I was just like, whoa, I don't know. This seems kind of like I shouldn't be watching this. I need to go to church and have a confession. But
I would say that if you wanted to create a challenge for somebody that was as difficult as what's happening in Ready Player One, my mission to you, Albert, would be invent a new type of porn. And I promise you, no matter what you can think of, it already exists. Like, it's already out there. I don't care what it is. We actually played this game one time, me and some friends. We lost, and we were coming up with some absolutely perverse stuff, as men often do.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of people that eat Play-Doh, and I don't get it. I've never even tried it. Like, the closest I've even come is you're playing with it and you still got that salty residue and you accidentally cut your mouth or whatever. Or, I mean, that's just like shock to the system. And this girl was just throwing this down, man. And she's sitting there just eating it. And she goes through like a total of 5 or 6 go look it up, by the way. 5 or 6 canisters of this stuff, all these colors, not flavors. It's just bizarre. I don't know why. Do you want to mention the fragrance?
Oh, yeah. So Hasbro actually trademarked the scent for Play-Doh to prevent people from making knockoffs of their product. And to celebrate the 50th anniversary, Demeter Fine Fragrances released a Play-Doh cologne for men, which you could buy today on Amazon for $21.95.
Really? It says simple, subtle, singular scents each day, every. Did you write that?
I did it. I'm assuming. I'm not sure the type of chicks you're trying to attract with that.
It says, pick me up cologne spray.
I didn't even read that.
I don't know who this is targeted towards. Maybe the 5-year-old that's just getting their start in school. I don't know.
Oh, that's no good, sir.
But bizarre.
I'm gonna get a bottle though, because I do collect colognes.
Okay, let's talk about this really quickly. Speaking of porn, this is so they released the Play-Doh Cake Mountain in 2014, as you can see here on the left-hand side. And it's just a kind of a cake set. But one of the things they released was this phallic-looking
extruder. It is a frosting extruder, sir.
Is that what it is? Okay.
It is.
If you say so. It's a syringe of some sort.
Yes.
There was a huge uproar. It took to Twitter. It was covered by the news feeds, and Hasbro pulled it back.
Did they? And
Did they? I don't know.
in?
They pulled it back. And they ended up coming back.
They pulled it out. They put it in. They pulled it again.
Oh my goodness, this was going to happen. I knew it.
This is a family show.
This is what they ended up redoing. Apparently, so it was phallic, as you can tell. It's about as phallic as you can get, honestly. And
I think it's just going to lead adult men to say, "Are you the old one or the new one? Which one are you?"
So they redid it, and what you see is that down here in the bottom right hand corner, that's the one that they re-released as part of the set. So
Nice.
these things sell for a lot of money now. Okay, so
I'm not sure why.
you can get one.
We'll give you some parting security advice for Play-Doh. So, as you know, I work in the security industry and have forever, basically security IT technologies. And one of the things that Play-Doh is oft used for in the security industry is to defeat biometric locks. So, if you have any residential biometric lock, all type of hand geometry readers are not created equal. So if you're buying one for $50, yeah, your fingerprint's unique, but only if it has so many points of reference that are used. So you can get a biometric reader anywhere from like 4 points of reference, which means 1 out of every 10 people can use it, up to like 50 points of reference. But Play-Doh is highly effective at defeating almost all of them. So if you see a spy movie where they grab the person's finger, that's not some special clay. It's just Play-Doh.
Really?
And it still works today. So if you have some low-end residential lock and you want to practice defeating it, grab you some Play-Doh.
Get some Play-Doh. Grab a canister. Eat some if you're at it too. Okay, let's see. Let's talk about a couple of things here. So I've got a Kurosawa and Cowboy Bebop reference together. It says this is now into chapter 25. Shoto's vessel was a large interplanetary trawler named Kurosawa, modeled after a ship called the Bebop in the classic anime series Cowboy Bebop. So this is, I thought we talked about Kira Kurosawa, who's, you can see him on the left-hand side. That's him at a younger age. Here on the right-hand side, he lived from 1953 to 1998. He was born in Japan. He's a writer, director, and by all accounts, he's one of Japan's greatest directors and most influential people in cinema. I mean, there's some pretty big names that are behind this guy. And a little bit later, I don't think I have a picture in here, but when he was much later in his life, I think around in the 90s, 92, 93, he was inducted into the Academy for like Lifetime Achievement Award. And the two people that came up to present the award were none other than George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. So that says a lot about his influence on them growing up. So he's done a number of films, 30 films in total as a director. You can see some of his more popular ones, The Hidden Fortress. We know that's got a lot of it leans into Star Wars quite a bit. There's Sanjuro, Seven Samurai is the one up here that doesn't have an English title.
Wait, it leans into Star Wars or Star Wars leans into it?
Yeah, Star Wars leans into that. I apologize. Yeah. Right. Yojimbo, Ron, all these movies are great, and they all have the same character. If you can tell them, it's Mufune, which we'll talk about here in just a few as well. There's two movies though that I personally like the most. In fact, when I bought a Laserdisc player, that'll date me.
I remember the day. It was already gone when you got it. It wasn't like you bought it when they came out.
No, yeah,
like
you're
when
right.
you bought your Laserdisc, we were already like, dude, that's dead tech.
Yeah, DVDs are coming out here soon. But these were two movies that I rushed out to pick up, and they are my favorites. Like out of all of them, and don't get me wrong, like Ron is really good. Seven Samurai is probably about as good as it gets for him. I don't disagree with anybody that feels that way.
That would be me.
Yeah, but personal reasons, I think Kagemusha is my favorite movie, with Dreams a very close second. And he did more than, he's known for all his samurai movies. He's done a lot of different types of genres. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. He's only done 30 movies. So, He does have some variations in them. Dreams, particularly, is very different. This is literally him retelling some of his childhood dreams in movie format. And he did these again very late in life. Some of his last movies that he ever did. What's really cool though is there are certain elements about these movies, and I'll just quickly run through them. And maybe if you have any interest in going and watching, if you've not seen Kurosawa films, I highly recommend it. Start with the ones that I've got here. But there are a couple of themes that are familiar and run in every single one of his movies, and they're done in purposely, which I love. It's a recipe. He's got weather and natural elements all throughout the movie. And anytime you feel like there's nothing going on, look in the background. You'll see something going on with the weather or something going on with the elements. He uses groups of people in a lot of his shots. It's not just a single character. It's just his style. He's got a lot of different people moving in different directions. He's got constant character movements, so the characters are always in motion. They're never really still or hold still for any period of time while they're on screen. Every shot he has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the camera it starts somewhere, it goes away to a middle, or pulls away, or it goes forward to a middle, and then it pulls back, and he ends on that. So there's again, beginning, middle, and end to all of his shots. And then he cuts on movement. So there'll be somebody moving, and he'll cut and show you another angle of that movement happening. And all this is to say that his style, I guess, is really based around movement. The way he directed all of his movies is around movement. And so visually, it's so captivating. Even the movies that you can't follow because you don't find them interesting or because they're subtitled and you don't want to have to read the title, if you just visually watch them, they're really appealing. They really get your attention. So I can't talk about him enough. He's like one of my favorite directors, and I've really always enjoyed him. I know you said Seven Samurai is, I guess, your favorite movie, but have you seen a lot of his?
Oh yeah, I've seen almost all of his works. I don't know that I've seen his entire, discography, but I've definitely seen all of the big films. And we're not alone. It's not like it's, he's some obscure person in terms of directing. He is among cinema considered one of the greats.
Yep.
In fact, Quentin Tarantino considers him an inspiration for the majority of his films. So it's why he called The Hateful Eight. The Hateful Eight was to go back to the Seven Samurai. And if you watch the Seven Samurai and then go back and watch, say, like either version of the Magnificent Seven, it is the exact same story, right? And in some cases, if you look the older one, there are some shots that are actually homages to the original film. He's a great director. All of his films hold up well. To your point, they all hold up well, and they're all filmed beautifully. Even the ones that are just old school black and white.
Yep.
It's like watching art.
Yep. No, I agree. Thank you for validating my feelings. There's and I mean that seriously. There's the top right hand corner. I've got a picture of Mifune. So Mifune he was in over 16 of the movies that he had done. So more than half of the movies he did with Mifune. And when they did Ready Player One, the movie, the character that they put on Daito, they actually reached out to his family. They got permission. They went through they did it all the right way. But they got the rights to put his likeness on Daito's character when he's in the Oasis, so which was kind of cool, and you can kind of see some of the similarities here between the Mufene characters that he played on film. So, let's talk about Cowboy Bebop. Let's see. So this was Cowboy Bebop. It came out between 1997 and 1998. There's 2 volumes, call them seasons, if you will, 26 episodes in total. The premise is you've got Spike Spiegel. He's an interstellar cowboy who chases down bounties in the year 2071. He and his team race across the galaxy in their starship Bebop and are at odds with the Red Dragon Syndicate, an East Asian triad organization who are hell-bent on killing anyone who tries to leave. No surprise, Spike was actually one of the members of the Red Dragon Syndicate. And this one stars Steve Bloom as Spike, who's, if you're in Star Wars, you know who this guy is. He's done a number of characters. He's done Zeb. He's done Stormtroopers. You name it. And he's another one of these prolific voice actors that's been just about everywhere. But he does the voice of Spike, who you see here in the middle. He's kind of the main character.
I like how you said, if you're into Star Wars, and then immediately started rambling off random characters. So I consider myself into Star Wars.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to put more emphasis in when you talk about Star Wars. Like, that's not like, hey, casual. I own like a 7-foot Darth Vader that's upstairs in my house right now. And the entire second floor is completely Star Wars themed, right? I don't know any of the things you were just saying. Okay, I heard Stormtrooper and then random words.
Yeah. Zebrilius. Yeah.
Yeah, Zebrilius. No, I don't.
He's from Star Wars Rebels.
Was he one of the things that they were playing chess with?
Yep.
I'm not sure.
All right, so that's Steve Bloom who's playing him. You've got Bo Billingsley as Jet Black, so he's like the ex-cop. He's kind of
the Hobbit.
father figure on the far left-hand side over here. You've got Wendy Lee playing Faye Valentine. She's kind of like the all-around team member here in the middle. She's actually 77 years old, but she looks 23, and there's a reason why.
You know why? Anti-gravity. That's why.
Yes, that seems to be working there. Let's see. And then we've got over here, Melissa Fawn as Ed. So she's the token Ed. I don't know why it's a boy's name. That's just bizarre, but she's the token hacker. She's only 13 years old. I don't remember why she has that name now that I say that. I've seen this a few times, but anyways, and then finally the last character is Ein, the Corgi, who does a lot of things that humans can do. And later on in the series, you find out that he's been like genetically altered and he's got, you know, the human intelligence and all that, but he's just kind of like this really cool character. So yeah, I would say that this is a really great series. I'm going to say that, and I do mean that in honesty. When you watch it, first off, the voice acting is awesome. Like every one of these people that do the American voice actors are outstanding. And a lot of times that's one of the things that really throws me off about anime is I can't get into a lot of the acting. And even the stuff that really bothers me, like the, you know, where they just make a noise. And I get it's the style and it's Japanese anime. I get it. That's it. But it's not something I like. Like people, I don't do that. I'll go, you know, and they're doing it for dramatic reasons.
I do that in real life constantly. Like when I'm in a high stress situation at the office, there's like, I imagine that it zooms into my face and then there's random effects in the background of my head.
Right.
And I'm like,
I do it when I'm on the can. That's about about the only time it happens.
You gotta eat some fiber, boy.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't. But see, even like that, they do some of that in the dubbed version. But I think the actors do a really good job of kind of like smoothing it over, so it's not so in your face. If that makes any sense whatsoever. So this was popularized here in the U.S. when it came across Adult Swim in 2001. And because of its success there, I mean, it pops up on, even to this day, it comes up every once in a while. They just show it. But it's a great mixture of anime, again, the voice acting, the acting itself, the story, the character relationships. It's really great science fiction if you're in just the sci-fi. And literally, I mean, everything you would want from a TV series in general, not just anime, but those are all good things to have in anything that you do. If you don't want to take my word for it, this has also been endorsed by Ryan Johnson on the left-hand side, who praises this to no end, and also Orson Scott Card, who says this is one of his favorite things. I mean, he calls it brilliant in terms of what it does for storytelling, and Orson Scott Card likes the character aspects of it. Like, he really feels like they do a good job of developing those characters and establishing really good relationships between all the characters as well. I should probably note as well, the reason this was in there, that's actually the Bebop. So when they talk in the novel about their ship, the one that they're flying around in, it would look something like that. So, I don't know, have you ever seen this one?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
So I think what makes this great is, and it's almost thematic for the 3 chapters that we're going through. There's quite a bit of reference in these chapters to pop culture references about cyberpunk. You see some of that referenced here. We're going to talk about it a little more with Philip K. Dick style. We're going to talk about it again when we talk about Blade Runner toward the end of the show. All of those things, I think that is why Orson Scott Card, who's a huge fan of Philip K. Dick, Isaac Asimov, all the early 1950s authors of science fiction, this is the universe they were trying to create their stories in my opinion. And I think, you can talk about the visuals and everything, but I think the storytelling of Cowboy Bebop is highly underrated.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't think it gets enough love, even though there's a lot of people that like it. In 2017, there was a live action series that was announced. It's supposed to be a TV series, I think. And there are 3 episodes in the can. John Cho is set to star in this one. So
is that Harold or Kumar? Which one of those is that?
I don't even know, honestly. I think it's Harold.
All right, well, there you go.
We'll go with Harold. But
Did one of
3
these guys
episodes
get in politics? I think one of them got in politics. I think it was this guy.
Cho?
I don't know.
I thought he was in Star Trek.
I don't know.
He was.
Oh, here we go again.
More Oturama.
Holy smokes. I don't even think I'm going to cross-reference some of these references. I'm thinking you're just adding Ultraman references randomly throughout the show.
Just to have him in here.
Keep talking about him. What is this? What is that? 5 shows in a row? We're talking about Ultraman.
So on that note, I thought we would do something a little different with Ultraman. So not a little different, but just dig into one aspect of it rather than going through the whole thing again. So the reference here is the Sixer ground forces closing in on him, froze in their tracks, staring up in frightened awe as Ultraman Daito snatched 2 gunships out of the sky and smashed them together like a child playing with 2 tiny metal toys. So that's the quote. This is Ultraman. And again, the book does a great and extensive job of explaining the premise between behind the 1966 series. So we're not going to get into all that. So I thought we would maybe talk about the conception of Ultraman, how we got Ultraman, where it all started, and this will be kind of quick, and then speak just to show you some of the incantations that they have of it. And it starts back here, believe it or not, in Tokyo, 1964. So this is the 1964 Olympics, and Tokyo, Japan was hosting them that year. Now the gymnastic team at this point, coming off the 1960 Olympics, had swept. I mean, they were like dominating the 1960 Olympics, and everybody figured they were going to be a shoo-in to continue all of that in 1964 because a lot of them were coming back. They were in their homeland. It was a given, right? So back then in 1964 for the gymnastics, they would rate your performances on a scale of A, B, and C. So if you had an A routine, that was kind of a good routine, but it wasn't as good as a B and certainly not as good as a C. The C was the hardest routine you could do. And so when this came out, these guys were kind of talking a bunch of crap, I guess. And that's probably not fair. They were probably pretty modest, I'm sure. But they said that they were going to take their performances not to A, B, or C, but they were going to take them to Ultra C to show you that theirs was going to be a whole nother level of performances that you've never seen before because they were that good. And so that word Ultra became part of the Japanese lexicon at that point. It was hugely popular. There were all kinds of merchandise, drinks, and you name it. Anything that they could throw the word Ultra on there, they would do because they were riding the high of the Tokyo gymnastics team from 1964. Eventually, this makes its way over into the TV show. So at the time, they were when they were coming out with, before they came out with Ultraman, they wanted to do something like this show here, which is called Ultra Q. Ultra Q was a tokusatsu type thing with a bunch of giant, what do you call them? Costume characters or whatever. This was all rubber costumes. This was all Toho. So Toho is kind of like the Godzilla company, right? We know them from Godzilla. They do all that. They were a primary investor in this series here called Ultra Q. And it was kind of like a mix between like X-Files and just your monster TV shows at the time. So they had these two characters. I find that
unlikely. I finally you're just throwing show names around. There is no way that's like the X. Like I can look at the cover of this and no, that's not like the X-Files. Is not that. That is like the Power Rangers and Godzilla. That's what that's going to be like.
So
There's not going to be any deep thought.
Two characters.
Smoking Man in the background.
I should have put him in there, like Photoshop Smoking Man in there somewhere. No, so the premise was they had these characters down here, and they would every week go. It was like a monster of the week, and maybe that's the only part of it that's really X-Files. But they were kind of doing this supernatural discovery for kaiju, which were the big monsters, right? Kaiju monsters. And so every week they would change the monsters out. And because this show was funded by Toho, they just literally took the Toho characters that we know from the Godzilla movies. Like, yeah, Twilight Zone's another good example. That's exactly right. Thank you, JR. So they took these different costumes. So right here, this one right here is Godzilla. That's just the Godzilla costume. They just threw a horn on top of it. Here's the King Kong costume here. That's Rodan, I think, in the back there. And they would just slightly alter them, but it kept their production costs down. They would just borrow props and trinkets and whatever else they needed from Toho Studios to go make this TV show. So this series, I think it ran only like one season, or maybe it ran a couple. I forget now. But this is where it really started. The whole Ultra whatever started with Ultra Q and eventually led into this, which is Ultraman. And you've got a number. I mean, there's, again, you could do a whole podcast. I'm sure there's a podcast on Ultraman because there's just that much stuff that's out there. They followed it up with Ultraman in 1966. And again, that kicked off the Ultra series, as they call it today. There's been 34 movies now, 40 television series on Ultraman to date. The most recent was like 2020 for the TV series, and the most recent movie was like 2019, 2020, I forget now. The one that I'm more, I guess, up to date on is the Ultraman, the Netflix series that came out a couple years ago. It's still out there. You can watch it. It's okay. I mean, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of anime, but and this is certainly a departure. I think in spirit, it's certainly Ultraman, but it's a departure from the 1966 TV show by a lot of accounts. So, all right, so that's all I got. I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about the gymnastics. I don't know. I forget. Are you a big Ultraman fan?
I do like Ultraman. Amongst these, and it's interesting because we started watching all these ridiculous shows like a couple episodes ago of all these old school freaking things. Are we talking about that again? We are
later. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, because I got into a spiral and ended up watching a few that weren't referenced in the books, and bro, they are whack. So, but I do have a new favorite, so we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Okay, good. I'm glad you got a favorite. Oh boy, lightsabers. All right, here's the quote. I took the artifact and examined it. It was a small metal cylinder, silver and black in color, with a red activation button on its side. Its size and shape reminded me of the lightsaber I owned, but lightsabers were a dime a dozen, and I had over 50 in my collection. So I didn't know where to, honestly, there was a lot here, mind going crazy about what do I talk about with lightsabers. So I thought I would do is just talk about maybe the origin of lightsabers, and I'm going to mix canon and legends. So for anybody that's a big Star Wars fan, you'll know what I'm referring to there, but I thought we'd just start with it. So originally, you had these proto-sabers, and the proto-sabers were, you had a backpack, a pack of some sort, you'd wear it on there, had a cord, and you would ignite your lightsaber that way.
Hey, are you following, just so you know, sorry to interrupt, are you following the Hacksmith guys on their proto-saber build? Have you been following them for
not. I've seen, hold that thought, because I didn't put it in here, but I do want to talk about it, because I've followed the, what was it, Star Wars did one, Star Wars Channel did one where they brought in some plasma thing and they were trying to create it, but I know there's work underway.
Hacksmith are the best. They've been working on it for 4 years. They release a video every 6 months or so with a new build, and they're slowly trying to perfect the proto saber. I will give you an update after you're done on where they are, but it's looks almost identical to your proto saber that you show there.
Yeah, and maybe that's where I pulled the image from. I don't know. This was like the cleanest image I could find. A lot of these were in comic books, and so it's really hard to get a good shot of them. But yeah, so the proto sabers were wired, they were heavy, bulky, they were unstable, they heated up a lot, and eventually that technology improved. And so eventually you get to a point where the proto sabers come off the backpack, and they're really just the power cells, or the power is on the belt, really. So you'd see them hanging off the belt, and you can kind of see it in this picture down here. And again, this is thousands of years, 4,000 years before. I mean, even longer, to be honest. It's thousands and thousands of years before we know Star Wars today in the Skywalker saga. From there, we get to I guess around the Knights of the Old Republic, and this is the High Republic. I just like this picture. But when you get to the Knights of the Republic, at that point, you realize it's the Sith that actually perfected the technology. So they were the first ones to incorporate a crystal into the hilt, and that allowed them to ignite that. And then we can get into like synthetic crystals versus natural kyber crystals, but that's a whole nother story. But they were the first ones to put a power cell within the hilt. The Jedi finally adopted that. They discarded the what they had been using. In fact, a lot of them were still holding on to old metal swords that were effective against lightsabers, Beskar and all that. But eventually they adopt the lightsaber as well, and so they kind of make their own versions. And at that point, I mean, it's kind of all the world's got. You could have any kind of color you wanted. There were tons and tons of variations. Throughout all of the Knights of Old Republic, you had all different variations of like Kurisames. You had pole arms with lightsabers at the tips, and you name it. Double-bladed ones like Darth Maul had. We got the crossguard hilts. We'll talk about those here in a little bit. But this is kind of at the highlight here, right before the Phantom Menace starts, and this is the High Republic. So this is kind of at their peak. Their lightsabers are more elaborate, at least from what we're seeing now. So this is something that's coming out next year. This isn't even out yet. This is the new Star Wars that's coming out. But
I got a question for someone who is just into Star Wars, right, and not expert all things Star Wars.
Yeah.
So, do the different kyber crystals, do they imbibe powers, or is it just basically? Because I mean, you think they would have perfected like the Philips Hue lighting system for those, where they could just change them on the fly, color coordinate with their outfits.
Yeah. No. No, it's a good question. They, to my knowledge, no. They're it is interesting though, the process of which you go about getting your kyber crystal from a canon perspective, right? So Legends is a little bit different, but from canon, when you are in the academy, they would take you out to Ilum, which was a planet that's now Starkiller Base. But again, another story for later. So they would take you out to Ilum, and you would go, and there was a trial, and these kyber crystals would call out to you. And so whenever you got there, you had to go through these icy caverns, and eventually you'd find the kyber crystal that was speaking to you, and you didn't know what color it was until you popped it into your lightsaber. In fact, there is a TV show right now on Star Wars Kids where they've got the guy that played Jar Jar Binks.
No,
yeah,
not familiar with him. Continue.
Yeah, so he's on there. He's hosting the show, and they have these kids go through this. It's like Double Dare, Escape the Temple, right? It's like that, but it's set in Star Wars. And the whole point is at the very end, if you get through all the challenges, they give you a kyber crystal, and you get to put it in. So they show the kids put it in the lightsaber, and they ignite it, and so you don't know what color you're going to get, and that's kind of the spirit of it all, right? The crystal calls you. You don't call the crystal. Now that said, you can go pop a crystal into anything, right? We've seen that many times, and there's nothing that stops you from picking up a red lightsaber and using it, or not being force sensitive and using it.
Right. Yeah. That seems odd too. I don't know. They could have used like a sorting hat, like the Harry Potter kid. Just yeah, man, you're green. Go.
Right. Go with it. So by the time we get to the Skywalker saga, lightsabers are all but extinct, and Palpatine is now in power. The Galactic Empire is in power, and they are on a mission to remove all lightsabers. They are purposely going around and killing people that have them, taking the kyber crystals, destroying them. And he's doing this to squash out any hope that the Jedi will ever resurface again, because he wants to stay in power as the Sith Lord would want to. So that's kind of the quick history on what we have and where we go. Here are some more famous lightsabers. I thought we'd just throw them up here. I don't know, that says Mace Windu. That's the Phantom Menace, though. That's the second version. Some of these are pre-production stuff and behind-the-scenes stuff. But, Darth Maul's lightsaber is pretty epic and iconic. Here's the infamous Luke Skywalker lightsaber, also known as the Skywalker saber now. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Darth Vader's, Obi-Wan Kenobi's, Luke from Return of the Jedi, the one he built himself. These are all great. I know you've got how many do you have? Do you have a pretty big collection, or?
I've got four.
Yeah. Have you gone splurge on the really expensive ones yet, or are you sticking with
they're all very expensive. Yeah. They're all
I want to go do the Galaxy's Edge ones because they seem pretty cool.
I don't know. They
crazy price though.
They don't look good. Yeah, I don't think they look good. I mean, they're souvenirs. Yeah, so I think they could have done a better job with them, but I think because they wanted each, the hilt to be 3-part interchangeable, it kind of limited what they were doing in design. So there's a ton of combinations, but if you were to use just one theme throughout, they're pretty straightforward. I think all of the Force Effects versions are far superior, and even some of the independents that, as you know, there's a handful of independents that do a brilliant job with them, especially if you're doing Star Wars fencing and stuff, because the effects versions aren't really built for that, and they really discourage you from doing it while you're hanging out at Disney World so you don't whack a kid in the head.
Right. So yeah, there's some pretty famous ones on here, and then just three of my personal favorites. There's Ezra Bridger in his lightsaber. That's the one before he built his other one, this green one. That's his blue one. So that's the lightsaber that also doubles as a blaster. That's what he pulls the trigger and it shoots out the front there. Then I've got the crossguard from Kylo Ren with the unstable kyber crystal on the inside. And then, I don't know, man, this is really kind of starting to reach up there as far as my favorite, and that's the Darksaber. So we recently saw that at the very end of season 1 of The Mandalorian. It really originally appeared in the Clone Wars, and then came back again in Star Wars Rebels, and now we see it in The Mandalorian. So that's a Dave Filoni creation right there. Maybe George Lucas, but certainly Dave Filoni's had a lot of input into ensuring that it stays within Star Wars lore and legend. But that one's really cool. All right. Any questions?
No, bro. But I'm telling you, you need to go out as soon as we're done with this podcast. Go to YouTube and look up Hacksmith Industries. It's a group of 4 engineers. They've been working on. They do all kinds of cool builds, but one of their favorite projects is trying to perfect a lightsaber. And so they've been working on it for 4 years. They released their latest version of a plasma saber, retractable proto saber.
What?
On I want to say October 8th. That video already has close to 14 million views. It is very impressive. Is it perfect? No, but it's the closest I've ever seen. So they've been criticized historically because what they were doing was just superheating rods and using those rods to do, create lightsabers, which is a difficult engineering feat in itself. But these
Sure.
are all proper scientists. And so now they finally progressed to the point that they could create, using natural gas fed through a protopack, a plasma-based laser sword, right? To
That's
some degree.
nuts.
It is cool. They have it, and so they have different, as you know, they have different chemicals that they're using to modify the color of that blade.
Mm.
It is tied it to a computer so they could automatically do because it's a lot of tuning to get the gas vapor right, so it's the appropriate height for a lightsaber. But go out and take a look at them. Those guys are amazing.
Cool. Yep. I will definitely do that.
They're doing God's work, sir.
I know. Yeah. I've actually heard about them because they do come up in the Star Wars circles, but I've never followed or dug into it much. So we'll have to do that. Okay. Let's talk about, speaking on that note, we'll continue with swords just very briefly here. This is the reference says Shoto took the sword and drew its ornate blade a few inches from the scabbard. Masamune, he asked, staring at the blade in wonder. I nodded yes, and it's a +5 Vorpal blade too. So there's Ernie Klein putting some Dungeons and Dragons on historic swords, but this is Goru Nyodo Masamune. So he lived, I think, between 1264, 1343. I found a lot of different varying, I guess no one really knows it. This is like their best estimation as to when he lived or born and when he died. He is heralded as the greatest swordsman ever. That ever created swords, and he's known. I mean, he created about 40 to 60 blades that are still known to exist today somewhere out there, and I'll come back to there in a minute. But he's also credited as creating the double quenching process, among other methods and techniques that allow him to make his swords really strong, right? So just quickly on that, there's these blades are highly sought after. Many of them that are still around exist now in museums. They're not in personal collections and all that. They don't exist, but his most famous blade was the Hanjo Masamune. And this sword, we know it was around during World War II, but when the Allies invaded Japan, the story goes that one of the Allies, and there's a name that they gave him, and there's been a number of people that have tried to track this person down, and they've come up with dead ends, but someone took this sword, a U.S. soldier or an Ally soldier of some sort. It sounds like it's U.S. because of the name, and I didn't write it down, but it's not important. But they took the sword, and it disappeared. And so they think it's still out there, but the worst case scenario is someone melted this thing down or sold it or pitched it into a garbage dump or whatever. But this blade is out there somewhere. It's missing this whole time. It's kind of like the holy grail of Japanese swords. There's a number of people out there that are still actively in search of this and doing whatever investigation they can find, even though this is 60 years later now since World War II. Is that right? 50? Yep. 60, 80, almost 80 years now, whatever that is. But yeah, it's been a while. So, and that's not the point. I couldn't find a picture of the Hanjo Masamune. That is one of his swords, though, which is right there. But cool stuff, man. Okay. Let's get into chapter 26. We're doing pretty good on time, surprisingly. This is John Woo, and I want to talk about John Woo, Chow Yun-fat, Hard Boiled, and The Killer. So the reference, the next 10 minutes played out like the climax of a John Woo movie, one of the ones starring Chow Yun-fat, like Hard Boiled or The Killer. Now, I got to be careful because this is really pulling at my heartstrings because these are two of my favorite movies ever, Hard Boiled and The Killer. In fact, I'll say this as well. This is, again, when I went out and bought the Akira Kurosawa films on Laserdisc, I went out and drove to Houston to a Laserdisc store that was a Chinese, Hong Kong Laserdisc store. And I remember going in there with one of my friends who was into, and I think I mentioned him on the show, Mendo. We went into that store to buy me a copy of The Killer and Hard Boiled. And I ended up picking up like Better Tomorrow 2, film by Wong Kar-wai called Chungking Express, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I wasn't planning on buying. But the funniest thing ever was going into that store and seeing all the Asian people in there looking at me like, what are you doing in here? It was a moment I never forget. I felt intimidated and really cool at the same time. But okay, so John Woo, he was born 1968. He's still directing. He's still alive to this day. He was born in China, eventually fled to Hong Kong, aspired to be a director. He got his first job doing screenwriting. And he really took off in 1986. That's when he had his big break there. He's done a total of 36 movies. He's done 6 here in the U.S., and I'll show you what those are here in a minute. His breakthrough was Better Tomorrow in 1986, and that had Chow Yun-fat as the main actor. And from that point on, there was a relationship that was established, kind of like Mufuni and Akira Kurosawa, just not as many films, but they together had a pretty good run of movies that they did in Hong Kong before they both came over to the U.S. But he's known for Better Tomorrow Part 1 and 2. Those were his first big breakout movies. There's other movies. I'll come back to that here in a second. But this is some of the other big ones he's had. Bullet in the Head. I know these sound kind of weird, the titles. Once a Thief, The Killer, Hard Boiled are all movies that he's done that were really great. And this is kind of, I mean, he's got a very unique style, as you can see right here. I've got a couple of GIFs. There's, again, kind of like Akira Kurosawa, the film, the camera rarely stops. It's always moving. And he's known for these really elaborate, over-the-top action sequences. They call it gung fu, I think and that doesn't sound really politically correct, but at one point that's what they were calling this genre
what it's called. Yeah.
in the 80s. And if you can see, like, one of the things I love is just the I don't know if it's got a name. I've always called it the particle effect, but he loves to blow stuff up and have particles or things just fill the frame in his shots, which is really neat to see.
Yeah, what's unfortunate is the Wachowski's brothers get a lot of credit for The Matrix in their style, but you can tell watching The Matrix, it's absolutely John Woo all day. It's old school John Woo, because John Woo's style, his signature style, is really this era you're talking about, right? The 1980s. Because he evolves from here. He starts making far more Western-facing films, which end up being, sadly, his top-grossing films, but are nowhere near as good as Hardball in these early movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except for Face Off, which is fantastic. It's brilliantly acted.
We'll get to that here in a minute. I do have that one in here. Yeah. So this is, we're not going to break it down, don't worry. But his movies, especially during this run of like Better Tomorrow 2, The Killer, Bullet in the Head, Hardball, all of these movies are great. They're, I think Chow Yun-fat does a really great job here, but we'll talk more about him too. But yeah, this was really, I mean, it was very different to see this, if you think about it, so this would have been about 95, 96 that I was going around and starting to collect all these pieces, if you will. And, seeing movies like this was very eye-opening. Like, there really wasn't a lot that was out there. And I think if you go back, I know the Wachowski brothers or sisters now, or I think that whatever they go by, they will, sure, they'll take the credit for their movies being cool, and they are good movies, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But they will be the first to tell you, no, this is where I got it from. This is where I got it from. Quentin Tarantino, I know you mentioned Kurosawa. This is another one of his influences. In fact, he's got a movie that he did that's just almost right carbon copy out of it. Reservoir Dogs is actually one of Woo's films, and I have a picture of that a little bit later as well. But you think about any of the modern action sequences, this is like your homework, right? You go watch John Woo, and you learn a lot about really making some of this stuff super dramatic and just visually stunning to watch. It's really great stuff. And it's very violent stuff too, which is totally different. The Hong Kong films back then were so much more violent than the U.S. films, which is what attracted to me. Not that, sadistic in any way, but I just liked that it was so different than what we were seeing on cinema here in the U.S. at the time. And I go back and forth, just quickly. I go back and forth between what my favorite movie is, The Killer or Hard Boiled. I think I always land on Hard Boiled just because it's just an overall better movie beginning to end, and with The Killer a very close second. So if you're going to go in and watch either one of these, start with those two. So he did come over to the U.S. Unfortunately, didn't do very well, and I was pulling for him because at this point, when he finally came in, he had already done Hard Target, so I wasn't really a part of that. But when Broken Arrow came out, I was like, I'm going to see it. I remember we went out to the theater, got in line. We were the only ones there. That's not important. But it didn't do very well. He had a lot of disappointment here. Mission Impossible. So he had Broken Arrow that had Danny Zuko and Little Jack Nicholson in there. Mission Impossible 2, which is, the second in the Scientology espionage series. They had Windtalkers, the World War II film, with the guy from Raising Arizona. His biggest movie was Face Off, 1997. That's, again, the guy from Raising Arizona there. And that one did pretty well, I think, in the box office, but still not a great movie, to be honest.
You absolutely take that back. I love Face Off. This movie is so... like when something's so terrible, it circles itself and it's awesome. Like it goes all the way around. Yep. I love Face Off. For me, it's highly quotable. Just everything from I Can Eat a Peach for Days, like terrible Nicolas Cage acting.
Yeah.
In fact, to this day, as you may know, for my birthday, I don't remember what year it was, I actually bought twin 45s with laser sights built into the hilt just so I could have the cool holster
Yeah.
like Nicolas Cage does in this movie. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's not. I guess, and I say that. No, you're right. If you're watching it with under that purview, then sure, I get it. Yes, it's a good movie.
And all of these did well at the box office. None of these were failures. They just artistically weren't
Okay.
up to John Woo's standard. Like those movies that, like Hard Boiled, these are iconic films.
Right.
They inspired a generation of directors. No one's looking at these 5 films saying, I'm making the next Wind Talkers.
Right. Or
What was
Broken
his
Arrow.
deal with Nicolas Cage? You loved him.
Well, I
Even
think
John Travolta.
yeah, I mean, I think he was. You got to remember, he's coming off immediately after he finished Hard Boiled. That was his. They both came over to the U.S. Chow Yun-fat and what's his face, John Woo. So
Yeah.
they both came over, right? And he had a really good recipe. He realized. I think he realized. And look, and if you look at his other films too, like he had a lot of his same actors in his movies. He liked to use a lot of the same actors, and we have directors today that do this as well.
Including himself, right? So in
Yes,
his
he was
films
in Hard Boiled.
before he came to the U.S., now he's in 25 of his films,
Sure.
but all of them before he comes to the U.S., right? And almost always his character is just named Mr. Woo. He
Mr.
doesn't
Woo.
even try. I'm not even trying.
Nope.
But he spells it different in the credits, like in a lot of his films. Like it'll have a Woo spelling with a U, a double O, a single O.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He's not a very good actor either. He's not.
Not like
really.
these thespians you have on the screen. You got Van Damme, John Travolta, and I'm a huge Christian Slater fan. It's probably a guilty pleasure.
Mm.
I will watch anything Christian Slater's in.
Okay, we'll see about that.
He's not on the list.
Yeah, he's not on the list. There was rumors of him doing like a Mighty Mouse picture, and I don't know. What was the other one? Metroid. He was going to do a Metroid movie.
Oh wow, that'd have been awesome.
But I don't know. It's all been just canned, and there's no one brought it up in quite a while. What's really cool though, he's a very devout Catholic, believe it or not. And you think about like somebody like that, and the movies that he makes, and just how violent they are. And don't get me wrong, it's more than violence. There are actually really good storylines, and I'll point to Hard Boiled as a very touching movie about two people, two officers, and their relationship, and going through what they're going through, I guess, in the movie. But it's really good stuff. But yeah, he does. It's just mind blowing, no pun intended, that he's actually as religious as he is, and looks to God for leadership. So
Now,
cool
JR
guy.
does note that MI2 had far too much Limp Bizkit in it, but let's be real. America had far too much Limp Bizkit in it at the point that movie came out.
That is absolutely true. And I was just listening to, hey, Brandon joined us. Hey, Brandon, welcome, man. I know Brandon listens to the show. Doesn't join us often. So, but yeah, there was, they just released like the 20th or 30th anniversary of one of the Limp Bizkit.
You know what? The fact you know that should.
I don't want to. This gets
What
me
is
fun.
happening here?
I don't
Let's
know.
talk about Chow
I don't know.
Yun-fat.
Okay. Chow
Or
Yun-fat.
is it Fat Fa?
I've heard Chow Yun-fat, Chow Yun-fat, Chow Yun-fat.
Wow.
I think that's how you say it.
That's not how you say it in America. Say that right now. Son,
Chow
your name's
Yun-fat.
Chow Yun-fat, son. Look, if you didn't want me to pronounce the letter, why'd you put it in your name? That's what I'm saying.
All right, so this is Chow Yun-fat, born in 1955. He's still alive to this day. Started in Hong Kong television in 1980. He didn't really do anything good until about 1986 when he did A Better Tomorrow, which is the film that you see right there. And so that was his big breakout along with John Woo. So he did Better Tomorrow. And he's honestly, he's a great, great guy. And I've got some personal stories with about him because, again, because of Mendo and my relationship with him. I had a chance to meet him once. And all I can say is, man, he is absolutely freaking honest, most down to earth. I mean, just will do anything you ask him to do. And maybe this was a sign of the times because he had just come over to the U.S. and was doing stuff in the late 90s. He had Replacement Killers had just come out. But he'd spent so much time talking to us, and I felt like we were really taking advantage of him. And I felt like we were taking advantage of him, but he never made us feel like that, which was really cool. So really, really nice guy. And he's really talented too, I think. I mean, he can do drama, he can do action, he's done comedy. He can do physical comedy, which is kind of rare these days. But yeah, just a great person all around. There's all the films. City on Fire, Will, if you ever get a chance, go check that movie out. I think, because I know you like Reservoir Dogs quite a bit. It is almost a. I'm not gonna say it's a carbon copy, but man, it is. This is where Tarantino quotes. He's on record as saying this is where he got the idea and the inspiration for Reservoir Dogs. But the storyline is very similar. Undercover cop, things go crazy, horribly wrong, kind of thing. But Chow Yun-fat's in that one as well. So much like John Woo when he came over to the U.S., not the best career in terms of probably a lot of these movies made a lot of money. But in terms of like the reviews and how well they did artistically, not good stuff for him. And I feel really bad because I think we were banking on him really doing well. And I know there were a lot of other people that were banking on him really making it here as a U.S. star. But he came out with Replacement Killers. That was his first movie with Mira Sorvino. Maybe that was his first bad move right there. But that was
I think that's the best movie he made in America.
It probably is. No, I'm saying
maybe because
with
I try to pretend like it's a prequel to Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. Like you just go in there thinking that, and you're like, it's like a cross of that and Grosse Pointe Blank with John Cusack.
Yeah,
it's all coming together.
Go. I'll try that. I'll take that approach and see how it goes. So there's that. He did Anne of the King, The Corruptor with Marky Mark, No Funky Bunch in that one. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. He had a smaller role in that one, but he was still in it. And then Bulletproof Monk. There's no reason why that's larger. I just
there's literally no reason for that movie to be larger on the screen. That's
you don't like Sean William Scott?
That I think he doesn't. He's not an actor. He is a prop.
Yeah, he's a prop. There you go. Probably better. But yeah, these are his movies. Again, moderately successful in terms of sales and all that, except World's End. I know that did a ton of money. But yeah, I just feel bad. And both of these guys, I mean, they kind of came over to America, had big dreams. Both, wanted to break out into the American cinema. They both aspired to get into American cinema. Honestly, if you look at their backgrounds, whether that was purposely or not, or maybe they both had the same vision after working together for so many years. But they both wanted to come over here, do really well. They did a spurt of 6-7 movies, and they were out. So much like John Woo, they've been out of American cinema for almost the better part of 12 years now, 2002, like early 2000s, somewhere around there. They both left. So they're both still working. They're both doing a lot of good work over there in Hong Kong and a lot of variety of movies and stuff. And they're huge stars over there. But yeah, didn't do so well. Again, these are just my favorites. So I picked these covers because these are the covers that I had on my Laserdisc. And I don't know if they were legit.
Those look like they just came off a bootleg.
I'm telling you,
at the swap meet.
This place that we went into was really, really shady, like I said. But these are the covers that were on the Laserdisc versions that I have. So when I think of these movies, these are the covers themselves. So great movies. And then I should note, a lot of people use this little jiffy here, and they don't realize that that's Chow Yun-fat. I mean, it's a cool little GIF, but
I don't know if you know this, but most people that use memes and stuff, they don't know what the heck they're doing. Like they'll post things and they don't know what it's from.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's talk some 2-player games.
Okay.
As here's the we got a couple of these, so we're gonna just kind of group them together and try to make some sense or heads or tails of these. As the vacuum yanked me through the game room entrance, I spotted a dozen video games inside, all from the mid to late 80s. Crime Fighters, Heavy Barrel, Vigilante, Smash TV. I'm going to turn this one over to you. I know you've got some fun facts. Now, I will say we have talked about some of these in the past on a previous show, but it's been a while, so have at it, dude.
I'm going to keep it short for this, right? Because I'm really excited about getting a Philip K. Dick and talking a little Blade Runner. So these 4 games are 4 games you commonly see at arcades. All 4 of these games were at Galloping Ghost when we went to
Chicago
Star Wars Celebration. Right. So I don't know if you recall this, but you and I were waiting on a taxi at 1:00 in the morning, and we played Crime Fighters all the way through. Right. We sat there and played through the whole game. You tried to quit once you left. I continued on, and then you got back and joined us for that. And
pause. So it's funny you brought it up because these are actually pictures off my phone that I took when we were playing Crime Fighters, because I couldn't stop laughing. I'd never really paid, I guess, that close of attention to these, but I wanted to capture the moment in high res, and so I took these 2 pictures. So yeah, and I didn't tell you I was going to put them in the
that's
presentation.
Fantastic.
There you go, Crime Fighters.
This movie, so this game's terrible, just so you know. This it's a Konami game. It was released in 1989, and it looks like it's probably from 1986. Yep. There is 4 characters to choose from, all with a different color palette. None of them special in any way. They're identical. Otherwise, all pixels are identical. So to give you a little background on each one of these games, Crime Fighters, the background is clean up the streets. That is literally all the background you get for this game. And then you go through the 4 levels that Konami puts in every single one of their beat 'em up games. I don't care which one you're playing. You're going to be on the subway.
Yep.
You're going to be on an alley. You're going to end up in a building, and then you're going to fight the boss. That's all you get with any of their games. This is the worst of those. Do not play it. Doesn't hold up.
Why? Okay, so why the hell did we play? How do you remember why we
Right.
played Crime Fighters?
So I think we played it because we were like, oh, look at the sprites. That's and it's a throwback to so many games we'd already cleared, and neither one of us had ever played this all the way through.
Nope,
Didn't even
that's
have a
true.
proper ending. Terrible. And it was like watching a bad Netflix series that you're kind of running through, where you're like, we're like 2 hours in, and you're like, we got to keep going.
Yep.
This game's got to end at some point.
I think I'm almost positive one or both of us uttered those words. It's
Yeah.
got to be over after this.
It's
And then
gotta-
oh no,
it's
there's
gotta
another
end.
level.
All right,
Uh,
coming up next is Heavy Barrel. This is actually considered a progression of the Ikari Warrior series, although this is a Data East title out of 1987. Another 2-player game. Unlike Crime Fighters, which is technically 4-player simultaneous, if you can find 3
Muster
other friends.
force people.
3 friends that hate themselves enough to tolerate the hit detection. So Heavy Barrel's background is terrorists seized an underground nuclear base. Let's go beat up some
Do
people.
it. Yep.
Right. So they use that throwback 8-way controller that you see in a lot of those games.
Mm.
So the whole concept of Heavy Barrel is you're trying to collect the pieces to Heavy Barrel. It's a super gun that lasts for 30 seconds. Game playthrough is less than an hour on this game. If you collected all the parts and pieces for Heavy Barrel, you would be able to create it 3 times, and that's it.
Yep.
Right?
And that gun
this
was
will-
massive. Like it was a heavy barrel.
Indeed. And this is one of 2 games on this list that was made into an NES port, and pretty successfully, I think. Heavy Barrel is well done on the Nintendo Entertainment Center.
Did you bring any of the NES versions?
No, I didn't bring any games because I went up to, so I've got upstairs in my media rooms where my games are all, and I have, as we've talked about, every NES game complete in box on NTSC along with all variants. But I started grabbing the references from this chapter, and we don't even cover them all because some we've covered in the
Right.
past.
Yeah.
I was like, what am I going to get, a dolly and bring all these games down here? And like, first of all, I know Albert's going to talk about some obscure Ultraman fact for 20 minutes. We're not going to have time to cover all these games. So
We're covering the
just-
Olympics, folks.
he's talking about some kind of Japanese Olympics and Ultra Seas. And
Yep.
Let's move on. Vigilante. Made by IRM 1988. This one really doesn't actually belong in the chapter. Oops, Ernie. This is a 1-player game. Right. So
Oops.
you are a vigilante in New York seeking your kidnapped girlfriend who looks and is named Madonna.
Mm.
Not sure how they got away with
Yeah.
this. Not an NES port, but can be found on the TurboGrafx 16, and that is a perfect port. It was also on the Sega Master System, but if you have the option of playing one of the 2, TurboGrafx is fantastic. Perfect.
Nice.
I do collect TurboGrafx stuff as well. All right. And finally, Smash TV. So you'll notice like arcade games in the 1980s are largely inspired by movies from the 1980s. Smash TV was probably the most obvious of that. It was a cross combination of both, as you would expect, the Running Man, because it has a Running Man premise, and RoboCop, which also
Yep.
has part of that in there. So created by Williams in 1990, this is a 2-player game. Originally, when this game was released, it did not have an ending because the developers never expected people to continue to play it till you got to the ending.
Yep.
It's one of the reasons I did not like this game, just like I don't like Rampage, right? They're games that feel like they don't have an ending
Keep
and it just gets
going.
monotonous.
Gauntlet is another one.
Yeah,
Looking at you,
and-
Gauntlet.
Yeah, and Crime Fighters. So, but Smash TV was ported into almost every NES platform. This is considered by EGM one of the top 10 arcade games ever made. It comes in at number 6.
Hmm.
So there you go. You can find Smash TV on virtually every platform.
Yes, and JR is correct. That is the guy that did this was one of the guys from Robotron. That did
That is
Smash
a
TV.
fact.
It was certainly, and I think we covered that. I think we actually covered that little trivia bit when we covered Smash TV back in the day. Let's see. All right,
That
let's
is true.
Okay, so what's going on here? Like, you threw this in here. I'm like, what? Why didn't tell you to put anything about Fire Truck in the notes?
Yeah, so no, you didn't. But we were talking about two-player cooperative games. That's really what we were talking through as we went through the chapter.
Yeah.
And this is the first two-player cooperative game ever made. And it's called Fire Truck. It was made by Atari. It's terrible. But basically one person drove the fire truck. The other one worked the hose. You could take that two ways, and they're both nasty. Anyway, this was the first cooperative game. So you'll notice as we go through this, we're talking about cooperative games, not, Pong's not a cooperative game. It's a competitive game.
Sure.
Like, so is Asteroids if you're playing the two-player, but this was the first cooperative game made.
And I remember the game. Like, I
have never seen this in the wild.
I've seen it. I don't think I've ever played it though. Like, I didn't even understand the concept because one, I think you had to have a friend. That wasn't happening.
That's sad. That's sad.
Yeah, I don't think I ever played this.
I would say I'll play with you, Albert, but that sounds terrible also. So
we're back to Play-Doh again.
We're right back to the Play-Doh.
Okay, let's talk about Black Tiger. And we don't need to spend a lot of time because again, it's featured in the novel to a great extent, given this is one of the challenges. But this was released by Capcom in 1987. Let me give you the reference. Sorry. But I could see now that my avatar was being drawn toward one game in particular, a game that stood alone at the very back of the game room, Black Tiger, Capcom, 1987. So again, Capcom releases in 1987. It's programmed by Tamayo Kawamoto. I think that's right.
Sure.
But this is one of those, it's just one of those, I hate this. I'm not like discrediting it or, downplaying it at all, but it is just another side scroller. I think we covered in one of the other chapters, we covered the number of side-scrolling medieval games that were inspired by a lot of the medieval movies that were coming out in the early 80s, like Conan and,
That's the best way to describe it, right? This game is, if you were to see it, you were to watch a video of the gameplay, you would assume you played it.
Right.
Because it's so similar to other games that were made during the time. So, there's the Japanese version is called Black Dragon, which makes more sense because the three bosses in the game are dragons. And the final one is Black Dragon.
Right.
I think in the US we called it Black Tiger and named it after the hero who was not black and apparently was named Tiger. I'm not sure why they did that. I don't know. But there are games that were made by Capcom, both Magic Sword and Satan for the Amiga, that use the almost identical sprite profile from this game. So if you saw this gameplay, you would say, oh yeah, it's, like JR, it's Roston, or, oh, is it this game? You wouldn't be able to distinguish it. There's nothing incredibly unique about it.
Yeah, and the picture on the left-hand side, that is a picture, again, I took at Galloping Ghost. In fact, when we went out there, one of the first things I did, I don't know if you were there yet or not, Will. I think I got there the day before you or something. I don't remember how that happened, but
yeah, I was in Vegas.
You were in Vegas, that's right. But that first night when we got there, we went straight to Galloping Ghost with everybody else from EGM and Cantina Cast, and I went around, and before I did anything, I went out and took pictures of all of the video games that I could remember from Ready Player One, in hopes that someday when we got to this episode, I'd be able to throw it up. So this was Black Tiger. I've got video of me playing it, and it's not exciting by any means, so we're not going to show that. But this game was out there, which was kind of cool, and the one thing I always said, the one thing I didn't like about this game was the marquee. And some of the marquees are terrible. If you look at like the games themselves do a better job with the graphics. Like, why could they not have just used the same font? I mean, I think they tried, but it looks really cheaply done. And I think that's why a lot of people didn't play. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a pretty popular game. But like to JR's point, people were playing Rastan or playing Golden Axe or any of the other, you pick any of these other games. Kadash is probably more popular than this one. But a lot of people were playing those games, and they weren't playing this. And I think that's, for me as a kid, when I was looking at the marquees and going, okay, does that look cool? And that doesn't look cool. And I thought I don't have a picture of it. I had a zoomed in picture of the main character, and you can see him there at the top, but he doesn't look all that formidable. So anyways, here's some of the literature or the stuff they'd sent out to the arcades to kind of, get the arcade owners hyped up and excited about purchasing it. The more you play, more exciting it gets. Okay. Long ago, 3 dragons descended from the skies above. Right there, it tells you, like, why would they change the name? Rolling Thunder and Destroy Kingdom in Darkness, from lengthy suffering and Darkness of the Kingdom came one brave fighter. That's what it says down there,
Nice.
left-hand side.
Hey, so I got an idea, Albert. So I'm thinking like after Ready Player 2 comes out and we have digested it and get ready to do that podcast in the future, I say we go back to Chicago, go back to the Galloping Ghost. We do our first show of Ready Player 2 from there, and then play all the video games that are referenced in the book. We'll make it like a 3-day thing. It'd be fantastic.
Okay, we'll try it. I don't. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but okay, I'm
You
with
calm
you.
down.
I'm with you in
You
spirit.
scared of the COVIDs?
Let's do it. No, I'm not. I didn't care about COVID. There's a lot of butt in this picture. All right, we're gonna move on. I don't even know what this is. This is again just artwork that was released as part of the arcade. I want to say that somebody had mentioned that this was on the side of a the arcade unit in Japan, but didn't make it over to the U.S. one. Which
Why
is pretty
would it
cool.
be? Because then it would be Black Dragon.
Oh, true. Well, maybe they changed it because that doesn't look part of the same picture.
It's true.
It looks like it's been thrown over it. Okay, Time Pilot. This is a one thing only. We're not going to spend a whole bunch here, but it was mentioned separately from the 2-player games. I felt like, okay, it needs its own space, and so that's why it has it. So this is Time Pilot, released in 1982. The reference is, as my avatar neared it, I reflexively reached out and grabbed the joystick of a Time Pilot machine. Reflexively?
No, reflexively is
Okay, that's what I said. All right. Okay. Reached out and grabbed the joystick of a Time Pilot machine. So this was designed by Yoshiki Okamoto, released in 1982. It was a top-down scroller. I've got a little jiffy right here playing if you're watching online or watching this on YouTube later. And essentially, you just flew around a plane. You flew around this plane, shot all these aircraft, and after you shot down a certain number, and you can kind of see it here in the bottom left-hand corner, that ticked down for all the different planes you shot. You would then get teleported to a different time zone. So you had 1980 or 1910, you were shooting bi-wings. 1940, you were shooting, it looked like Japanese Zeros, I think, if that's what they were supposed to be. In 1970, I think it was like helicopters, Vietnam helicopters. 1982, they looked like MiGs, like Russian MiGs, because, that was a big thing in the 80s. And then 82, 83, whatever the year it was. And then in 2001, which was supposed to be in the future, some 18 years when after the game was made, or before the game was made, after the game was made, you were shooting down UFOs, like literally they looked like UFOs that were flying around. I don't have a picture of it, but and then on top of all that, as you were doing that, there was these little people that were parachuting down, and you had to rescue them, and it was a fun game. It was really popular. I remember very distinctly this being on Stargate, not Stargate,
Starcade.
Starcade. Oh, I said Stargate.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. What I remember most about this game is it was featured over half the time as one of the games that you would play in Starcade.
Yep.
Awesome.
And I enjoyed the game. I think they did a really good job with it, honestly. Did this make it out to the NES?
No, this was an Atari port, so it went to the 2600, and at the same time, unusually was also released at the same year for ColecoVision, but no NES port. But it has been, as you would expect, on a number of compilations after that, just like all the other games we kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I didn't even touch like all the sequels and remakes and all that stuff. There's so many of them, but yeah, good stuff. Okay, so we'll keep this short too because a lot of these characters we've talked about, but I did want to mention just this quick reference here.
Hey, what happened to the game?
What game are we playing?
Play a game.
Oh, okay, let's play a game.
Let's play a game. What
On
happened?
Time Pilot?
No, I put a game slide in here for you to play. Amongst the video games, I see what's going on here.
I don't see the
We
game
can talk
slide.
about the Japanese freaking Olympians,
Oh,
but
man.
you're unwilling to test your mettle because we're going to talk about more Japanese robots.
I don't. Let's see. Wait a second.
You have failed me for the last time.
I'm Admiral. There is not a slide in here.
I see what
there
you're doing there.
is. Hold on. Let's
I
just do
see
it.
what
No,
you're
we'll do
doing
it.
there.
We'll do it. Come on, look here.
All right, there we go.
Let me move this over. So what I'm doing is I'm correcting my wrong here for anybody listening to the audio podcast of this. I am okay. I got it. All right, we're good. We
You
got it.
omitted a slide, and
I
so
did
this
omit a
was
slide.
a Gunter game I put in for Albert to play. In the spirit of two-player cooperative games, I have put up on the screen 10 of my favorite Nintendo Entertainment System cooperative games. So, Albert, let's go through these and see if you can name them. Some of them are softballs and some of them are a little harder.
Yeah, I can tell.
So let's
Okay,
go with the first one.
Is that top left-hand corner?
Top left-hand corner. We're going to work our way through it that way.
Smash TV.
You are correct, sir.
Okay. And then the one to the right, Wingman.
Wingman. All right. So this one had a very ancient Greece feel to it, right? Your character was a winged guy who flew too close to the sun.
Oh, Kid
It
Icarus.
was called, no, that's a good guess, though. No, this is Legendary Wings.
Legendary Wings.
Excellent.
I knew it had wings in it somewhere. Okay.
All right. And you know what? I'm going to guess how many friends you had based on how many of these you could name. If you only know all the one-player games, I know it was sad.
It was a
times.
sad life in the 80s.
All right. Next.
This is Battletoads. I know that for sure.
Indeed, sir. Next.
That is Contra.
Indeed. Next.
This is
My favorite co-op game for the NES is right here.
Oh my goodness. And it's a really
basically
good one, too.
two Jeeps going through. It has a very Ikari Warriors feel, except the Jeeps were way cooler.
I'm drawing a blank on it. And I did have this game at one point.
Jackal.
Jackal. Yeah. And you could blow through those doors down here, right?
Yeah.
Blow through all the
You could
buildings.
do everything. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're picking up POWs. It's fantastic. There's a plot to half the games. Picking up POWs.
This has got flowers. What in the world?
This
This is a chipmunk one. This is
Yeah, highly underrated two-player game because it
Yes.
came later in the life cycle of the NES. But if you have a friend, it demands that you play cooperatively, which where the other ones you could just have one kid dying every 30 seconds, and this one you needed to stay
the
together.
Rescuers.
Yes, Chippendale Rescue
Chippendale
Rangers,
Rescue Rangers.
correct.
Okay.
All right, we're down to the last four. I think
Ikari
you're
Warriors.
doing pretty good. Yeah, that was
Double
easy.
Dragon.
Wrong.
What?
As you may recall, the first Double Dragon for the Nintendo was not two-player except for
Ransom
the
City?
fighting game. Nope, it's Double Dragon 2,
Oh.
right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you're right.
Because
I
Double
can see
Dragon
the
1.
cover.
Oh, no, I know, I'm right, sir. Double Dragon 1, not. It was the most disappointing thing when Double Dragon came out. Wasn't two-player co-op.
This is the TMNT arcade version, yeah?
It is. So I'll give you. Circle gets a square. It's TMNT 3. Nice.
Okay, thank you. And this one, what the heck was this?
This game's title was a 4-letter acronym. You played one of two characters that went through a screen design, level design looked similar to R-Type in terms of how they had
Yeah, that's
designed it.
true. I can't think of the name.
SCAT.
Scat? I would have never guessed
It's
that.
an acronym for something, cyber something, tactical arms. Who knows?
Interesting.
Who knows? But not bad. Albert, I'm giving you a passing grade.
Okay, we'll pass.
I know who the Scat Man is.
Scatman Crothers. We talked about him on the show.
It's the Scat Man. Bada bada bong, bada 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 bing.
Okay. More. Speaking of which, we're gonna talk about more Japanese robots.
I'm gonna have one more drink.
Smoke them if you got them, boys and girls. This is the reference. There were several robots I didn't recognize, but most were familiar. I spotted Gigantor, Transor Z, the Iron Giant, Jet Jaguar, the Sphinx-headed giant robot from Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. That's the one you said. That's the one I told you was the inspiration for Twinkie. And you said his head looked like a penis.
His name's not Twinkie.
Twinkie.
You know, Twinkie. He's gold. They're yellow. It's the same thing.
He's got the lasso and the big 10-gallon hat. Okay, so where was I? Flying Robot, the entire Shogun Warriors toy line, and many of the mechs featured in both Macross and Gundam anime series. And then later on it says, but I stopped cold when I saw Leopardon, a giant transforming robot used by Spider-Man and the incarnation of Spider-Man who appeared on Japanese TV in the late 1970s. So we're not going to break every one of these down, so don't worry. You're safe. I thought we'd just talk about them because I think a lot of people don't know what they are or who they look like. So Gigantor is in the top left-hand corner here. He came out in 1963 in Japan, debuted actually in 1965. I think the Ramones did a cover of that theme song, or somebody famous. Maybe you can look it up while I'm talking because you're not going to be paying attention to this anyways.
I
But
stopped listening 3 minutes ago. I'm not even sure who I'm supposed to be looking up. It was a cover for something.
yeah, Ramon. Who did the cover for the Gigantor song? It came out in the Saturday morning album that came out, and don't hold me to this, but I'm going to guess 1997, maybe 96. There was an album they did with Saturday Morning Covers.
The German band Helmut
Helmet
did a cover called Gigantor, opening theme.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, fantastic.
What year did that album come out?
The YouTube video posted in 2011.
Get out of here.
Bro, I don't know. Hold on a second.
All right. So this is Gigantor on top left-hand corner. This is Transor Z, which is the U.S. name. In Japan, it was called Manzer G or Manzer Z. Manziger G. Z. My goodness, I'm getting all that screwed up. That was in 1985 that it finally made it over here. Oh, dang, I didn't want to do that. There's the Iron Giant. We all know the Iron Giant. Came out in 1999. This is Brad Bird's one of his first movies that he ever did before he went on to go direct over at Pixar and did some live action stuff. My favorite, and no shocker, is the guy down here. I don't know why I picked that GIF. It's not very flattering, to be honest. But that's Jet Jaguar. And I'll tell you why I'll tell you why he was like my favorite. He's so obscure, number one. And he appeared in Godzilla vs. Megalon in 1979, I think. And he's a character he's a main character, but he's not really part of the whole. What is going on? Whoa. What in the world? Hold on here. Having some difficulties. I don't know what I hit. There's something going on with my mouse. Like it's starting to like fire up its own stuff whenever it wants to. Okay, we're back. I apologize. So this guy he's pretty obscure, but in the movie of Godzilla versus Megalon, there are these three scientists and they built this robot called Jet Jaguar. And at some point in this, it's like a humanoid robot. He can grow big, grow small, all that stuff. And he ends up fighting with Godzilla. And the reason why I liked him more than anything was I used to have a winter jacket that were the same three colors as this back in like 1979, 1980, somewhere around there. And this is we were living in Michigan, so it was a really big puffy jacket. And I just remember putting that jacket on and I would pretend that I was Jet Jaguar because I had the three primary colors that he had. And that was really, it sounds stupid and trivial, but that's why I like that character the most. Here's Johnny Sacco, or Johnny Sacco. It's late. I'm just making up stuff now. This one, that one actually did make it out to the U.S. as well. And I think it's part of the morning cartoons, if I'm not mistaken. But that was in 1967 to 68. It was called Giant Robo in Japan, and that's what they're throwing up there. And then came over here as Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. Shogun Warriors was interesting. They were a bunch of these 12-inch or 24-inch, Kara toys. Now, this came out like in the late 70s, 78, 79. I didn't own these, and I've mentioned this many times in the show, so I do apologize. But there were a number of one of my cousins, older cousins. He was like, I don't know, 8 years older than me, 10 years older than me, maybe even older. He was huge into Shogun Warriors. And he was huge into all these shows, and that's the only reason I even recall these. It wasn't because I was watching them or I had any access to watch them. He was living in a much bigger city, and somehow he was getting this stuff, and I don't even know how he did it. But Shogun Warriors, he had a full collection. So whenever I went over there, I would play with all of these characters here, as well as the Godzilla that you see down here, and it had this little thing on the back that you would pull down, and his tongue would lash out. And that was I just thought it was the coolest thing. His fists, all the fists would fly off. Godzilla's fist would fly off. And the concept of the Shogun Warriors is like they literally just went out and took all of these famous characters from all these different Japanese TV shows, and they just threw them all together and said, they're just Shogun Warriors. They're all from Japan. They're not related in any way, but they're toys, and they all look cool. And that was kind of how it came to be. Marvel did a comic
than
as well.
that, right? So of all of the things we've talked about, this is my sweet spot, right? Because this is Force 5, right? This is my favorite of these. So in America, you wouldn't even know Shogun Warriors for the most part. You would know Force 5, right? Because it's Guy King, Vanguard Ace, Star Avengers, Grandizers. I don't even look this up. I know these characters. And when this was on TV, I was in 6th grade, and my best friend was named Jason Pataki, who we graduated with.
Oh, yeah, I know Jason. Yeah.
And so Jason and I would watch these, and then we would talk about them. And I'm going to let you see behind the curtain of what a big nerd I was growing up. We used to have a spiral notebook, and I would draw like a robot, and I would come up with I'd draw a line and say what his super powers were and what he did, like power punch, like all the different powers that these guys had. But I'd make my own ones up. Like there was one guy whose whole bottom half was a drill bit. And then when I was done, I would give it to him and then he would draw one. And then a couple days later, give me back. And then I would draw one. And so at the end of the school year, I had this big old fat 5-subject freaking spiral notebook full of all of these different robots that we came up with. And it was all because of Force 5.
That's crazy.
Awesome.
I will say this too, and you can take my Gunter card. I never knew it as Force 5. I did know it as Shogun Warriors only because.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was advertised as Shogun Warriors in the late 70s. Maybe they changed it. I'll need to look it up. Maybe you can look it up. But
no, like Mattel sold it as Shogun Warriors.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying like, hey, you wouldn't know it. What I'm saying is that like what drew you into that, for us, because Force 5 actually. They showed it in Texas. So, I mean, it was something that you could see here. And I love this show. I actually own these. It's probably, we talked about Ultraman and all these other ones. And I'm like, And then when you went through 2 slides back, and I think you had a Force 5 right there. Boop, top, middle, winner. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Geizinger. Perfect. You win.
Transversy. Yep, he's in there. You can see him. That's cool. Here's just a couple more. So top left-hand corner, that is Macross, or better known as Robotech, and that was everywhere in the 80s, like 85, 86. And I want to say it was on Showtime, and I didn't get a chance to go do some research into where it actually aired when it came out. But that was pretty big, and it really did introduce a lot of folks to anime here in the U.S. because of how out front and center it was. You got Gundam in the top right-hand corner here. I did include the Gundam from the Ready Player One. That was obviously put in because they couldn't get Ultraman. And then bottom left-hand corner, that is Skyfire from the Transformers. So that's the original 80s toy. And this just kind of speaks to what they were doing. They were really just taking all these different toys from Japan and bringing them over early in the 80s here in the U.S. and just throwing new labels on it and saying, no, now it's a Transformer. This is actually... Robotech was one of the first ones to actually come up with the guy that created this also created Diaclone, whatever it is, the other toy line that the Transformers came from. I'm really kind of going all over the place here, but he created Macross, and when they brought over the Transformers, they needed more Transformers because they ran out of things to sell, and so they just grabbed this Macross toy that was transformable and threw an Autobot symbol on it and called him Skyfire and said, "Here you go, this is a new one." So he looks totally different than any of the other Transformers in the cartoon or in the toy line because he's not part of the same series whatsoever. But, as a kid, we just thought he was really cool. So, and then you've got Leopardon, which, we talked about a few episodes ago as well. So, all right, that's all we're going to do on that one.
Nice.
Let's talk about Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick.
Let's see. I'll let you take it. Tell us who he is.
Awesome. So Philip K. Dick is one of my favorite authors. So I'm going to get personal right off the bat that Philip K. Dick is one of my favorite science fiction authors, and mainly because of his short stories, although his novels are brilliant as well. Prolific writer. I mean, Philip K. Dick in his time, I think he wrote 44 novels and 121 short stories. So one of my favorite magazines, and it was old even when I was young, is Science Fiction Analog. If you've never heard of this magazine, I certainly believe you have heard of all the contributors to this magazine. It is where a number of the authors that you like today got their start. So this one is Timothy Zahn.
Nice.
Right. Here's Isaac Asimov doing his, right? Along with Michael Flynn. This little guy, George R.R. Martin.
Never heard
of
him.
And these are all from the 60s and 70s, right? These are their really early works. So this was a place for authors to go to really get their start. They paid 8 to 10 cents a word when they were writing these. This magazine has been published since 1930 and is still being published today. But wow. Philip K. Dick, one of the contributors of this, and they still pay for by word. So I have a few science fiction short stories. I am going to be submitting them to Analog Magazine because it's always been my dream to be published in this magazine. It's not huge circulation, but this is typically, if you were to read a year's worth of Analog, at least half of the stories that end up making the year's best science fiction are first published in this magazine and have been for decades.
Do you
So
have
K.
Philip K. Dick's first book there?
No, I don't
Oh.
have. I mean, no. Some of them are incredibly expensive to get. But
Oh,
I
see.
I have over 120 issues of this. So I have like a decade's worth of
Whoa.
these.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but most of mine are from 66 to 83. So, Philip K. Dick, born in December 1928 and sadly passed away in March of 82. Philip K. Dick, prolific writer, a very troubled life. I mean, he was the first science fiction writer ever to be included within the Library of America series. His first successful novel was The Man in the High Castle, which you may recognize from the TV series, and won the Hugo Award. So, if you're looking for great science fiction novels, the best thing to do is look up Hugo Award and just start reading them, because there's not a single bad Hugo Award or Nebula Prize winner that's out there.
Yep.
He's thematic in his writing. So he largely writes about evil corporations, identity issues, alternative realities, and you'll see that theme through his books and the dozens of movies and TV adaptations of his work. So deeply troubled. He attempted to push his third wife. He was married 5 times. His third wife off a cliff using his car. He was considered a Marxist and a socialist. He refused to pay income tax, mainly because of his disdain for the Vietnam War. In 1955, he was investigated by the FBI, accused of being a socialist. He attempted suicide twice, once by drugs, once by driving off the road with one of his other wives in the passenger seat.
Oh, my goodness. Holy cow.
He abused drugs. He went to rehab several times. In fact, if you've read or seen A Scanner Darkly, that is his interpretation of him going through that period of his life. He believed for 2 years of his life that he was possessed by the prophet Elijah, and believed he experienced paranormal events all the time, including this pink beam of light, which he believed was sentient, intelligent, and imbibed him in all of these gifts. Absolutely had issues. As you'll find, a lot of the science fiction writers of the golden age had issues. It's almost like it's the writing's cathartic for them, almost like Stephen King when he was, they say he wrote his best work when he was going through the worst times of his life, and then as his life normalized, his books weren't as good.
Yep.
Terrible.
Yep.
But you definitely recognize his work. We're going to be talking about this one here shortly, the 1982 film Blade Runner. Have you read the novel of this, Albert?
No, the novel. No, I know some of the differences between the novel and the movie because I'm a big fan of the movie, but I've actually never read the novel.
So biggest difference is obviously the title, right? When Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yeah, which you have over here. You can see it right there.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the original Blade Runner, and is largely sticks with the movie except for the end part, the story. So it wouldn't be tinfoil. Like if he was doing the book, it would have been a frog. Because at the end of the book, he goes off into the wilderness. He's trying to get away from technology and this whole Android thing. He finds a frog and he's like, finally a real living frog. I thought they were extinct. He takes it back home. He shows his wife. She injures the frog and realizes it's also a robot.
Fake.
So Scanner Darkly. And I have 2 dates here. So you see the date of the release of the movie in the upper left-hand corner. So Scanner Darkly is 2006. But I always find it fascinating in terms of prognostication for these science fiction authors of when they wrote it.
Wow.
So written in 77. Minority Report, which I think is an underrated film and probably his best. I love Minority Report.
The book
and was
or the
written
movie?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. I think the movie's underrated and the short story is fantastic, and was written in the 1950s. I mean, can you imagine that? The world that you see in Minority Report, and really what Philip K. Dick talks about through all of his books, it's about the human condition. That's what he's writing about, that the human condition is constant. So the culture can change, the technology can change, the world events can change to these alternate realities. But he does a fantastic job of building characters that remain constant, timeless, and make it easy for the reader to empathize with. When you look at his work, he doesn't write about like a king or the most famous or the president. It's always these everymen that are put in these positions. They're either like a janitor or a mechanic, or they're or an old beat up detective. They're not, the prototypical protagonist, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
He did Total Recall. He did the Adjustment Bureau, Paycheck,
That's
which
directed by John Woo.
Yeah, nicely done. I was hoping you'd catch that.
Yep.
Next
slide.
Scanners with the Screamers with Gary Sinise. Just countless great films. And then if you haven't seen it, in 2017, we ported over the BBC Electric Dreams over to Amazon Prime. And each one of the episodes is based on a short story by Philip K. Dick that have been selected for the work. I love that.
I'm in. Yeah.
It is absolutely worth watching. And it's more worth reading because as an author, I think science fiction authors are often challenged because they are tied to what is often referred to as the O. Henry twist, where they do that now they call it like the M. Night Shyamalan engine. Yeah. But that was originally the O. Henry twist, like based on the Ransom of Red Chief, that short story from the 1800s. Same concept. I think a lot of short science fiction short stories get thrown into that, but he does a very good job, even in his short stories, of strong character development and really building an environment out. If you look at the way that I'm going to just call it Blade Runner to keep it easy for the audience instead of keep saying when androids are dreaming of electric sheep. If you look at Blade Runner as a book, if you read it, built cyberpunk.
Yes.
The idea did not exist before this. So the world he built is the Cowboy Bebop world. It is the world you see in countless science fiction movies. Started there. Brilliant.
Yep.
Great writer. Have you read any of his work, Albert? I know you've seen most of these films.
I've seen most of these films. No, I didn't. I've not read. I don't think any of these, to be honest. I know.
Well, I know what you're getting for Christmas. No, I don't.
Great.
No, I think plenty of people. It's hard to find good writing, I think. If you're not someone because look, for every good book I talk about, I read 3 bad ones, right? And that's a big investment for us to make when we're trying to raise families and have kids. But I haven't read anything bad by Philip K. Dick. I have read stuff that I thought was slow by him, but I could say the same of Asimov, right? There's some stuff that's slow.
No, I can tell you, I am up to date on all the Star Wars novels, but I have to do that for the other show that I do. More than
I know
anything.
all of Ernest Cline's work.
And all of Ernest Cline's work. And that's about it. I mean, honestly, I've got another book coming in here just shortly that's for Star Wars, and I'm trying to squeeze that in now before it actually releases. So, but that's neither here nor there. I'm sorry, do you have anything else on?
No, that's it. That's all I got.
Nicely done.
Highly recommend.
That's good. Okay, in the next hour, we're going to talk about Harrison Ford, Blade Runner. All right, this is our final thing. So if you made it this long, congrats. Appreciate you being here. So this is Blade Runner, directed by Ridley Scott. The reference says, I instructed it to demagnify the scan of the wrapper and center the image on my display. As I did this, it reminded me of the scene in Blade Runner where Harrison Ford's character Deckard uses a similar voice-controlled scanner to analyze a photograph. Enhance. So this is directed by Ridley Scott. It is a neo-noir science fiction cyberpunk, to your point. One of the first. I don't know that anything else came out before this, and there certainly was a lot that came out afterwards because of just how influential this movie was. Well, it's set in the year 2019 in Los Angeles, and that's a very different Los Angeles, and kind of like my background here, by the way. That's where that came from. So it stars Han Solo as Rick Deckard, an ex-Blade Runner, someone who looks for androids or replicants hiding among us, who is called back into service after they find out that some replicants have made their way to Earth illegally. The movie revolves around Deckard and his attempts to retire these replicants, and he falls in love with a woman named Rachel along the way, who is a replicant. And that's kind of the story. I mean, I know that just for the sake of time, I kind of really try to condense that down. It also has the guy from Lady Hawk. It's got Roy Batty, Edward James Olmos as Gaff, Sean Young as Rachel, Daryl Hannah as Priest or Pris. I forget how her name is pronounced. James Wong, who's amazing in everything he does, as Chew. And then it's just got a ton of other people that were really huge in TV back in the late 70s, early 80s. There's a number of people. I mean, you watch them, they're like in the background. You're like, hey, that person's on the Love Boat. And like you said, the themes that it deals with here are the nature of humanity, corporate greed, power, the moral guidelines. What can we do? What are the barriers? What should we not be crossing? That kind of thing. So I'm glad to hear that it was in the novel, and it seems like a lot of that did carry over into the movie.
Yeah, so it wasn't really Scott's idea to do the whole film noir feel to the film. It's in the book.
Yeah.
It is intentionally written that way, like it's almost like a Humphrey Bogart kind of film.
Yeah, Gumshoe kind of.
Yeah.
She was a tall blonde, whatever.
Yeah. It was raining the night she walked in.
This is one of my favorite all-time movies, hands down. And it is a movie that I can put in and watch and do other things, because in my head, I don't need to watch it. I can visually see what's happening because I've seen it so many freaking times. It is I can't say this enough, it is one of my favorite go-to movies. It's like a comfort food, if you will. The music was by Vangelis, who did Chariots of Fire. I don't know if you're a big fan of the music in there. I'm a huge fan of the music. It's kind of got this synth sound of it, and then it's got these jazz, the saxophone that comes in from time to time. It all plays into that neo-noir kind of motif, and I think they do a really good job of it. The special effects were light years ahead, honestly. Let me give you context. I say light years ahead. There was it was all practical effects, right? What they did here, and what they were doing was stuff that we wouldn't be able to really technically do with computers until many years later. And so it is heralded as one of the greatest movies in terms of science fiction relative to its time and what they were able to do and what they were able to show. I mean, the stuff that you see here, and a lot of, again, it's all practical and playing tricks with your mind and perspective and all that. I mean, Ridley Scott went to no end with his team to kind of put that all together. The movie itself did $30 million. It took $30 million to make. They pulled in about $42 million, so it was profitable by all accounts there. And this is just, I threw these in here because I thought in the novel it mentions that he's approaching the Terrell building, and this is the building here. So if you've never seen it, this is what the building would have looked like in the bottom right-hand corner. In the top left-hand corner, that's just kind of the scene of what Los Angeles looks like. It looks like a cyberpunk type city with oil refineries right in the middle of it, right? They've completely just taken over here. I'm not sure I don't think it's ever explained in the movie. Maybe it is in the book, but they never really explain what those are. I always assume they're just kind of like oil refineries. So that's how far corporate greed and these corporations have gone. But that is a Terrell building here that he makes his way into and has the big gunfight before he gets into the machine there. You mentioned already that this is obviously based on the 1968 novel Do Androids Dream of Sheep, which is by Philip K. Dick. And this is the machine here. So in the movie, they're talking about the comp machine.
I believe those are used by Scientologists these days.
They may actually be.
They use a machine that it always, anytime that they show like a Scientology freaking documentary and they're talking about whatever it's called, tuning or whatever, and they have this machine, it reminds me of this because it's a series of questions they're asking you, right, to find out whether or not you're pure, and they're trying to get to your deepest, darkest secrets. Crazy.
Yeah. So this is the Voight comp machine that's mentioned in the book, and that's exactly what it looks like right here. This is Deckard using it, and there's the eyeball. That's a kind of a famous shot from early on in the beginning when he's interviewing that one replicant that just escaped. And then this is a game by Milton Bradley. No, I'm kidding. It's not. Someone photoshopped this, and I thought I was dying laughing that this was a game. It says the classic replicant detective game. So I wish they would make this. I think it'd be pretty.
Now, wait, that kid's from something, and that chick's hair is awesome. They're trying to do that same.
She's got a cigarette. Yeah, she's like the Rachel look.
Yeah, that's awesome. That kid looks familiar, though. He's in something.
He's not. And then this is where we get the title of the movie. This is the very last scene. Well, not the very last, and that's all really.
Title of the show.
Title of the show. What did I say? Title of the movie?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's late. Title of the show tonight, Like Tears and Rain. And this is the final speech here that he's giving when Roy Batty is like talking about, all the memories, and he's about to die, basically, is what he's saying. He's got all these memories, and he's basically sad that since he's about to die, all of it's going to be gone. He has nothing more, and he's just went through this whole thing with Deckard, talking about feeling emotions, fear, pain, and all that. It's a very sentimental moment. It's like there's a lot of great quotes in this movie, but this is just one that always stuck out to me. So, and he is crying in this movie. He's crying in the scene because it's raining. You can't tell, and I just thought that's really powerful. I always thought it was, and so I said whenever we get to this episode, I wanted to call it Like Tears and Rain. So that's the background for it.
And you're familiar. I mean, obviously, you're familiar with that whole story. That was not in the script, any of it. That entire monologue was Rutger Hauer.
Just doing his own thing there?
Yep.
No,
absolutely,
I didn't know
100% of it. Yeah. It was fascinating. I mean, people say that's what he's, and now he passed last year, like in July.
Yeah.
And that is what he's best known for, is that
scene. Wow.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
Fantastic.
So here's the different versions, and I got to give credit to Media Muse on YouTube. Like, I was like going to go down this path of putting all this together and coming up with I wanted to explain all the different versions, because as growing up, these versions were out there, and I always knew they were out there, but there was no internet, and it was really hard to understand what all these different versions were. And this guy, Media Muse on YouTube, did an outstanding job. He wrapped this all up in about 3 minutes. So I'm literally using some of his work. So I do apologize for that, but I can't. He did such a great job. I need to honor him. So there are 5 versions of Blade Runner that are out. You have the original director's cut. I'm going to call it director's cut. This is Ridley Scott's original version that he pitched to Warner Brothers to put out. Warner Brothers didn't like this version. They tested it out with a bunch of audiences and felt like it was really slow, didn't get a lot of positive feedback. They took that to the editing room and they put their own spin on it and did some editing, which made Ridley Scott a little pissed off, to be honest. Then there's the international cut, which is the one here in the middle. And the international cut has, it's much more violent. Well, no, I should say much more. It's slightly more violent than the U.S. version. And then you have the director's cut here, which was released in 1992. So 10 years after the release of this movie, they did the director's cut. This was approved by Ridley Scott, although he did not cut this film himself. Again, this was cut by the studios that released it, and he signed off and said, yeah, it's good. And we'll talk about what the key differences are for here about all of these in just one second. And then finally, you have the final cut, and that was released in 2007. This was edited by Scott himself, so Ridley did all of this work himself. And they actually went and touched up some of the audio and the visual effects as well. So you get a better sound, you get better picture quality than any of the other versions.
And did a far better job than Lucas did when he did it.
Ouch, I mean,
no, you know that's a fact. Like,
no,
he touched, like, it was artistic touches that he added to it. He wasn't adding silly CGI background monkeys and stuff.
Yep. And one of the key omissions, I think, from this is the unicorn dream sequence. So, and let me ask you, Will, since you read the novel and I haven't, was this not in the novel, the unicorn piece? Okay.
No. So there's a lot of, in fact, interestingly, and I'm glad you have both of these up, a lot of the story elements. So when Dick wrote this, as is typical in his novels, it's a bunch of complex storylines that are interwoven in it.
Yeah. Like,
none of them translate well immediately to the screen. So almost every movie you see is a truncated version of the novel because of the complexity. So 2049 actually takes more story elements from the original novel than I would say even Blade Runner does.
Interesting. So this is the unicorn sequence, and the reason I mean that there's a scene at the very end of the movie, and if you watch the final cut, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you watch a director's cut, you'll know what I'm talking about, because this scene was included in both of those. It was not in the original theatrical release. It was not in the international cut as well. But there's a moment there at the very end where the moment that's in there is the one that the book references, the little paper unicorn, right? And the origami thing. Well, earlier on, the scene that was omitted was Deckard having this dream of a unicorn. And he has a very vivid dream that he has seen a unicorn at some point. And so when you watch the movie and when that scene was omitted, when you get to the very end, you see he finds that little paper unicorn, and it's Gaff that he just figures, okay, Gaff's around here because he's the guy that's, making the unicorn stuff or making the origami. Then if you put it in context with what Ridley Scott was doing, what it alludes to is maybe that Deckard was a replicant himself, because the only way he would have had there's he had the dream, and then later on sees the paper unicorn. That implies that at some point Gaff knew that he was a replicant, and that's why he put that there to kind of give him a hint or whatever. And that's been a big source of controversy for years, and it's probably not so much these days as it is when this was first out. But I remember in the '90s, at least, where people were going back and forth. We were debating as to whether or not Deckard was a replicant. So
I think Dick would have approved of this, even though this isn't the final messaging within the book. Obviously, it's more about a human just being surrounded by this technology and frustrated with it and his inability to escape it, right? And the fact that it's becoming more and more human. So in the book, unquestionably human, right? No doubt. Harrison Ford and Ridley Scott have both been on record officially saying he's definitely human. But if you take the film, any cut, I don't care even what Ridley Scott says, the evidence is he's a replicant, right? In my opinion, I think the evidence, it is designed to be open-ended. And that's what I think Dick would like, because many of his stories are the same way. Because I think as an author, when he was writing, he was about the human condition. He knew we were flawed. He knew he was flawed. And so in many cases, he would have a twist at the end, but leave it up to you for interpretation and say, look, man, I ain't got all the answers. This is just what and I think that messaging here is perfect. I think Harrison Ford, he wants him to be human. In Dick's version, he's human. Ridley Scott has said on record he's human, but if that's
he's also
all
said
true,
he's a replicant too.
Yeah, he's just playing the game. This to me, I think he likes all the chatter, to be honest with you. But I think if you're following the story without any background in the book and you're taking the film, the evidence 100% suggests he's replicant.
So I'm one of those people that when it comes to the source, if the source says something, then that's the end all. Because I'm with you. I used to be with you. I was at one point, as a kid, I was, he's human, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what do I know? Later on, 90s, this whole theory starts coming about whether he's a replicant or not. I start jumping into the camp of, holy crap, that'd be awesome if he really was a replicant, given what he goes through in the movie.
That started in the 70s. You can actually find articles from the 70s in sci-fi magazines.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about the movie, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm talking about I'm sorry, in the early 80s. Even, I think there's a space log that talks about it from that, or star log, sorry, that talks about it at the time the film was released.
So then I get into like the 90s and I'm all on board with replicant. And it wasn't until later, probably the last 10 years that I saw that Dick had said, no, he's human. And like you said, he is absolutely human in his mind. He never wrote this, never meant to write this as though there was any ambiguity there or that he was a replicant in any way. And so when he said that, I was like, okay, well then that's kind of the final say so. And I don't mind it either way. I think it's a great conversation. I like having the debates about, proving one way or the other. But if the author that wrote the original source says he's human, then to me, he's human. It's like George Lucas. He puts his foot down and says, this is what Star Wars was, and this is why. Then you can have all your theories, and it's cool. We can certainly talk about them. But at the end of the day, at least in my head, I'm gonna lean on the
I'm actually unusually, because I'm a huge Dick fan. I'm still going to go the other way. At the point that you entrust your baby with somebody else, and you're transferring it to a different medium, you might not like all the choices, like Roald Dahl earlier with the whole Willy Wonka thing. Yeah. That doesn't deny the director the creative license to do what he wants with the characters. And I thought to some degree 2049 only reinforced it, like the idea of Agent K, and that it was to him, he was looking at Deckard as a paternal figure because he was a fellow replicant doing what he was doing.
Yeah, no, I get that too. And I didn't want to even mention 2049 because I think that kind of threw us for a couple different things. But so, here's the...
look at this.
Yeah, here's just the breakdown real quickly of the differences between the different Blade Runner cuts. I forgot to mention the voiceovers. So in the original Ridley Scott version, there was no voiceovers. And so they gave Harrison Ford like 10 lines of dialogue. And if you listen to it, it was funny. You listen to it and he's so like, there's no enthusiasm in any of the voiceovers he does for either the theatrical cut or the international cut. And there was a lot of speculation, rumors that he just kind of sandbagged that because he was really unhappy because he really wanted the movie to be as it was, as Ridley Scott had originally released it. So that's in those two versions. There's also a happy ending that's in the theatrical international cut, and it's kind of what you were talking about. And I thought you were going to go here, but maybe it's similar to the novel. But it shows Deckard and Rachel, and they're heading out into the woods, like they're just getting away from society altogether. And that's literally how it ends. Just on that note, it just kind of shows them driving. They're in a wooded area. They're away from all of that stuff and going to live some happy life somewhere, which is kind of cool. I mean, I don't mind the ending so much. It's certainly different. Again, you only find those in that cut. And then the Unicorn Dream is only in the director's and only in the final cut. And that was Ridley Scott kind of, again, putting his own spin on the story. And so that's why that he approved the 92 version, because that was inserted. Prior to that, he had not approved any of the other versions that are out there.
And I think at that point I thought that inclusion after 92 was just an outright, he's a replicant admission. Like if you thought this was too vague, like if you couldn't read between the lines or everything we were doing here, let me throw one more piece in here to make it obvious. I mean, they basically say it at that point, right? Like, I mean, it's hard to get around.
And then this one, so all that said, this one just kind of, I mean, this is a wonderful movie. I really did like this and what they did. It felt very comforting in terms of like Blade Runner. And again, like I said, it had an impact on me, but I really enjoyed this. And I went out and watched it in the theater. I went and bought it the minute it came out on Apple TV, and I've watched it a few times. I don't think it's as good as the first one to me, only because it's just, kind of personal, but it is an excellent movie. I was going to play this little game with you, by the way, and we're out of time, but I was going to play this game with you and tell me and have you guess as to these famous people and whether or not they said he was a replicant or human. And I'll just give you a spoiler. And yeah, everybody agrees that he's human, with the exception of Ridley Scott, who said he was a replicant.
Oh, wow.
And Fancher, the screenwriter for the original Blade Runner, said he was human. So you've only got really one person that's kind of said that he's a replicant, at least the people that are behind the creative staff behind it. And that includes, again, Roncher, Ridley Scott, Harrison Ford, David Snyder, who's the art director, Rutger Hauer said he was human. The only person that was like on the fence and said, I don't really sure.
And Philip K. Dick.
And Philip K. Dick. The only person that said they were completely unsure and they love this was Denis Villeneuve, or whatever his name is, the guy that directed Blade Runner 2049. He loved the fact that this was still out there and it was still a topic of conversation and debate. So he didn't want to take one side and said he doesn't care. He just loves the character. Well, there you go. Another episode in the can.
Nicely done, sir. Well, let's not put it like that.
Oh, that wasn't too bad. We actually got through that pretty quickly, all things considered. What time is it? 2:30? Yeah. All right. 2 hours, 27 minutes. All right. There you go. 24, 25, 26. Light tears and rain. You got anything final before we get out of here?
No. Happy birthday to the U.S. Navy. Today, 1775, the U.S. Navy was, so all of our men in uniform. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's about it. It's also National No Bra Day, so women,
hey,
I appreciate that.
Celebrate that day every day.
Well done. Well done.
Happy birthday to you. You've got a birthday here in a couple days.
Yeah,
3
Friday.
days to be exact.
Friday's my birthday. I'm 39 again. It's fantastic.
Congratulations.
I don't know how I know all these references being as young as I am.
No, happy birthday to you. We're not going to be on before we come back, so you'll be a little bit older.
Oh, you see my Mario shirt?
No. Oh, yeah, let's throw that up there. Hold on.
Yeah, Korean art. Oh, look at that. Got that bad boy in Mexico.
Really, that's a real Mario.
Yeah. But if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see a link to where you can get stuff like that, man. It's a great company. They make awesome shirts, all kinds of Mexican-inspired pop culture. And thanks, JR. Nice. Appreciate the happy birthday.
Happy birthday. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us for this episode. We'll be back next week to talk Rush and only Rush. Yep. We'll have a special guest.
I may not even be here. Yeah, I might not be necessary next week. Don't get me wrong. I like Rush, but I don't. Like I'm into Rush, like we do with Star Wars earlier. Yeah. But Albert's going to talk about Neil Peart for 47 straight minutes.
That's exactly like right. The first hour is Geddy Lee. The second hour is Alex Lifeson, and hour 3 will hit Neil Peart. I know we're actually going to do the show. You need to come back because you went to a concert with us to go see Rush, and
I've been on the Rush a few times,
but not with me. We've only seen it together once. But we went to this was Bill Alwine. So Bill, he's been on the show at least 3 or 4 times now. Early on when we first did the episodes, he's coming back, and we've got pictures. I'm gonna dig out the pictures that we took when we were at the concert. Do you remember any of this?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I was like, hopefully you didn't, because then I was gonna hit you with it and surprise you. But
Yeah,
no, we
nice.
took some pictures over there.
So you know the Ernest Cline Rush connection, like you know Ernest Cline's first screenplay, right?
First screenplay.
First screenplay released. What's the first screenplay he wrote? So he actually got his Actors Guild card for his first screenplay, which was Fanboys, right? That
Oh yeah,
story about
Star
the
Wars.
four guys. Yeah, there is so much Rush in that movie. I'm surprised you never. You know, like the part where they're in the van and the dude's like going through the guy's car, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you pick something to play?" He's like, "Dude, there's nothing in here. There's no variety. You got
all
nothing
Rush."
but Rush in here."
Yep.
He's like, "Rush is variety."
Yeah, it
I
really
was like,
is.
"Hey, that's Albert."
Yeah, I can give you a Rush song for any occasion. Trust me,
No, you can't.
I can. Even one to get married to,
Uh,
or do something intimate with someone.
what?
kidding.
in
No,
your-
I'm kidding.
Your poor wife on both counts.
I'm kidding. I kid. All right, we're gonna get out of here. We're leaving. Thank you, JR. Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Thank you, everybody that joined us, either live or if you're watching this after it's been out. We do appreciate the support. You can follow us on all the social media stuff, and please subscribe to the show so that you get the alerts the next time we come on air. And with that, we'll see you guys next week. Did you rush?
Later, Bert.
The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Cline. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.